IB Nation, welcome to a special edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I'm Brian Driscoll. That's Ryan Roberts. That's Vince D'Addario. We got the whole crew here for you today. And I swear to y'all, we did not intend to all be wearing the same shirt today. That just kind of happened.
Woo!
But we are here today to talk about the commitment of Taebron Bennie-Powell, who just announced his decision today. Just so you all understand why we were running behind, he was supposed to commit at noon. Then it got moved to 12:30, and then we sat around for another half an hour waiting on him to finally make his announcement so that we could have this show today. So we appreciate all of you being patient with us. And so, guys, we're going to dive into this. We're going to talk a little bit about the backstory of how this commitment came to be. We will talk about the class impact of Taebron Bennie-Powell. We will dive into some film, and we'll talk about what's next. And we'll have some of our opinions. I think some of you know how we feel about this commitment, but just so you understand what today's show is about giving you facts and giving you analysis and not banging on certain aspects of it, right? There'll be a time and a place for that. We want to celebrate a young man who is getting the chance to do something that all of us in this chat would have loved the opportunity to do, and that is play football at the University of Notre Dame. And so in that regard, I'm very happy for this young man. And I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that. There will be a time and a place for some of the other discussions that you all want to have in the chat. I'll just ask that today we hold off on that stuff and let's just talk about this young man and for what he is. And because I think one thing that we can all agree on, we all hope this young man comes to Notre Dame and balls out. That's one thing I think we can all agree on. So let's dive into that. But guys, this commitment from Taebron Bennie-Powell, a little backstory on him. He was a high school teammate. So he's a kid who actually has not played the position that Notre Dame is recruiting him to play. There's a good reason for that. The two starting safeties at Lakota West last year in Westchester, Ohio, were a kid named Ben Minich, who is now at Notre Dame. There's a kid that Ryan and I both graded out as a 4-star player, pretty darn good football player. And the other starting safety was a kid named Malik Hartford, who was also a really darn good football player, who was at Ohio State, who I would have gladly taken at Notre Dame in last year's class. So it's just one of those circumstances where, and Ryan, I know we've talked to the coach about it, and this is a big thing that his high school, the kids had high school coaches talked about how, this is a young man that played a position that was not his normal position. They think he's more of a third level guy, but he played basically outside linebacker, sometimes almost acted as if he was a rush end at times last year, because that's what his team needed him to do to get him onto the field. So this season he will be transitioning into more of a third level safety player. I believe Ben Minich's younger brother will also be a part of that secondary, I believe, right, Ryan?
Yep. Yes.
So there's another Minich coming down the pike here. So we'll see what kind of player he develops into. So, guys, as Notre Dame went through the recruiting board and had a lot of misses in this class, I mean, just being honest about that, and they just kind of kept their eyes open for other players. This is a young man that presented himself. The coaching staff at Lakota West really pushed hard for this young man. They believe that he has the ability to be a Power 5 caliber safety. He's a young man that has offers from Duke, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Pittsburgh. So Notre Dame did some research on him, and first and foremost was, what kind of young man is this? Does he fit what we're looking for as a young person? He passed all those with flying colors. Then it was, okay, let's get him on camp and work him out. So I was actually at the camp last Thursday, fellas, when he showed up. So I watched him go through all the drills and do all the workout. He was doing drills with all the DBs, and then there's other times the coaching staff kind of put him through some drills over there on the side, just kind of working him out, asking him to do a lot of different things. And he worked. He put in the work, and obviously at the end of the day, later that same day, Notre Dame came out and offered him a scholarship. So that is where we are. And so he decided. So what happened was he told the staff he wanted to come that night. They told him, "Hey, take the night. It's an emotional thing. You just had to work out. You really wanted this offer." I overheard his parents at the camp talking about how they were talking to Ben Minich, and they said, this is the offer he wants. So this is kind of a dream offer situation for this young man, which is something, again, whatever you feel about whatever else, that's a pretty cool thing, right? This is an offer this kid won. He went and was willing to earn it, and he got it. But they did say, hey, take the night, put your head on a pillow, get some rest. If you're still feeling this way in the morning, let's do this thing. He did. And then, of course, was going to announce his commitment on Monday originally, and then it got pushed back to Wednesday. So he made his announcement today, but this is a deal that has been done really since Friday. And so that's a little bit of backstory. So it kind of happened pretty quickly, guys. So it went from missed out on some other safeties, Obviously, the staff at first wanted to Paul Menke. There's some stuff happened there, which we'll have closer to signing day. They thought they had a good shot to get Oliver Miles. That didn't go well in the visit, and so they were kind of sitting there. Jalen McClain canceled his official visit because he's going to Ohio State. They weren't going to get him either. They tried to make a push for DeJuan Lane. He ends up not visiting, goes to Penn State. We could kind of do this for about the next 10 minutes. But they found this young man and brought him onto campus. He worked out, earned the offer, and now he is a member of the Notre Dame 2024 recruiting class. So, Ryan, when you look at how this impacts the class, obviously Notre Dame needs 3 safeties. This kid now gives them 2 safeties as he joins Kennedy Urlacher in the class.
Yeah, and he can hopefully continue as a nice little pipeline of Lakota West. I mean, talking about that, I mean, you mentioned Ben in the last cycle. Obviously, they have had a long history of consistently putting out very good defensive players and putting out talent into college football. So, I mean, you mentioned just last year with Ben and Malik Hartford and being able to push forward there. And I had the chance to talk to Tyler Holes, who is a defensive coordinator at Lakota West. And Brian, literally my first question to him was, what is this young man's upside as a football player? You know, I asked him just strictly like that. And he answered, I don't know how to 100% answer that question because we have never seen him at his real position. He was a young man that because of Malik, because of Ben, had to play somewhere on the football field. It just was not going to be at his traditional and comfortable safety position. So he had to play what they call a rover in their system. And Coach Holes actually is the rover coach on the defensive side of the football. So he works with him every single day from the intangible side of things. You mentioned that, Brian. This kid checked out with everything that you would want. Obviously, he's an academic kid, hardworking kid. Most kids that are safeties that get pushed into that role of having to play on the line of scrimmage a ton and play on the second level, they wouldn't be too happy about it. But to Taebron's credit, Taebron took it, ran with it, and didn't complain one bit about playing the position that he had to play. And his team to obviously make a playoff push and be able to be a very successful defense last year. And then in the playoffs, when he got there, he actually had an adductor tear that was obviously affecting him a ton. The team needed him to play. So he continued to play. He's a tough kid. He's a relentless kid. So from the intangible side of things, it's a very easy sell for Taebron. On the field, this is one of these where I am going to take a step back and I'm going to watch what he looks like as a senior because they are correct. We haven't seen him play the position that Notre Dame is recruiting him for at this time. He ran 4.58 at the camp, so obviously there's some athleticism to work with there. Plays at a very successful program. Obviously, he isn't a scrub. So being able to see what he looks like as a senior, I think is going to be big. The coaches kept reiterating to me, this kid's going to be really good. Sky's the limit. You haven't seen the best of Taebron Bennie-Powell yet, so I'm excited to see what he's able to accomplish.
That's what the coach is telling you, correct?
Yes,
right, just so we're
correct.
clear, that's what the coach is telling us. And so, and I'll say this too, that this is a coaching staff at Lakota West that Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden know very well. Mike Mickens know very well. Obviously, they're from Ohio, but all these guys used to be at Cincinnati. And look, if you're coaching at Cincinnati and you don't know the Lakota West staff, you're not doing your job very well because that's obviously one of the better programs in that area. So they're part of this, guys, is they're banking on trusting that coaching staff and trusting that this kid can make that transition. There's some risk to it, obviously. Mm-hmm. We'll have a lot more to say about this later, but you know, all the people there, they vouch for this kid. So we'll find out. We'll find if they're right or not. I think when you look at stylistically, obviously from what we do see on film, we'll dive into the film here in a few minutes, guys. But one thing you do see on film is he's not the biggest kid in the world, although actually he looked a little bigger in person to me. So I actually had a chance to, I know we haven't seen him play safety, but I had a chance to see him in all those drills go through the safety movements, which I'll kind of dive into a little bit during the film part and a little bit later. But he definitely needs a lot of work technically. There's no doubt about that. You can tell he's not comfortable backpedaling and flipping his hips and opening and running and all those type of things. He's going to need a lot of work there. So we'll see how that transition goes. Has okay size, so, look to be about 6 feet tall at least, and good 180 plus pounds. So he's actually a pretty decently put together kid, on the thinner side, but not as thin as I thought that he would be. But when you looked at him, guys, he's definitely a kid that will hit. And He's got good short area quickness and all that, but the thing is, he will stick his nose in there. So you at least look at the film and say, at least you know he's going to bring you that. At the very least, this kid can be a special teams player for you. Another thing the staff liked, we'll talk about this. We'll talk about this in the film per se, but he did run a 4.58 at the camp, which is I mean, a little better than what Adon Schuler ran last year at the camp. Right now, we don't see that necessarily on film, which we'll get into some of the reasons why. But so he did some things that the staff liked, and he obviously did some things that allowed him to earn an offer from the Notre Dame staff and obviously earn their commitment. So what he brings to the class, at the very least, guys, quality special teams player, high character young man, someone who fits in at Notre Dame in a lot of different ways, geographically, academically, character-wise, all those type of things. And you at least know you're getting someone who can hit. There's a lot of question marks in a lot of other areas, but at least you know you're getting that. So there is a baseline that you can build around. And I think the one thing, Ryan, when you and I first saw this kid's film, we'll save the rest of the conversation between us. But the one thing we said to me was like, this kid can hit. And you guys will see that when we get a chance to watch film. So I do think that's something that the staff likes about this young man. And now you've got two hitters in we talk about class impact. You've now got two hitters in the class. And Kennedy or Lacker and this young man. And so they're clearly adding some physicality to the back end of the defense, Ryan.
Well, and a really cool note is I like that you put it out there, Brian, that like he looked a little thicker than maybe what you anticipated. He played last year at about 170 something pounds. His coach told me that he's up to 185, 190 right now. So he's had a pretty nice weight gain. And I think that weight gain has improved athleticism this offseason, which is another reason why I believe that staff is very excited about what he is going to potentially do as a senior in 2023. So yes, he is a player that on the second level, surprisingly good tackler for a safety his size and able to do some of the dirty work and to do some of the hard things that a lot of safeties don't want to do. There's a lot of safeties that just want to stay back there, make the plays on the football. Think about Andre Cisco when he was at Syracuse, like he wanted to intercept a lot of passes, but didn't want to get his nose dirty. This kid wants to get his nose dirty, and I think he is a very interesting player moving forward. We'll see how everything works out, obviously, but there are definitely some things to like about him. There's no doubt about that.
No doubt.
Well, one of the things that, has come out as I've been researching him and listening to you guys and all that, one of the things I want on my team, if I'm building a team, is I want a kid who is not only willing to stick his nose in, not only willing to do whatever his team needs him to do, right? It's not his natural position. He could have been like, look, I'm a safety. I'll be back here and I'll do my thing. And when I get on the field, great. I'll sit behind these guys and then I'll have my moment. They needed him on the field. And so he's playing out of position. He's playing a spot because he needed to help his team. That's number one. Number two, he was willing to put the work in to get the offer from Notre Dame that he really, truly wanted. Like a lot of guys out there would be like, you know what, if you're not going to offer me, I'm not coming to your camp. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there's a lot of that kind of attitude out there. He doesn't have that. That speaks to me about who this kid is. And like you said, he's a high academic kid. He wants to get on the field. He wants to earn what he's got. A lot of that speaks to me on how you want to build your team and the kind of guys that you want in the locker room. He's the kind of guy I want in the locker room.
Now, and that's the thing too, guys, is if you're going to take a chance on a kid like this that doesn't have very impressive film, that didn't have a good on-campus workout, you better be adding a kid that checks all those boxes.
Right, exactly.
You better add one that checks the toughness box, the character box, the academic box, all those type of things, and certainly does that. And everything you hear about him, comes from a really good family and all that kind of stuff. So, we'll see how it kind of plays out, guys. And just so people know, we will be having a mailbag after we're done talking about Taebron Bennie-Powell. So you guys can throw those questions in now if you want to get to them as we dive into those different type of aspects of it. So let's dive into the film, fellas. You guys feel like watching a little bit of film today? That's a rhetorical question because the answer is always yes. So we'll dive into that one. Let's watch some film of Mr. Taebron Bennie-Powell. And what you guys are going to see is he is near the line of scrimmage a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to see early on in the film as well that he can stick. Now, one thing I did notice watching a little bit, doing a little bit more of a further dive, guys, that's what we're talking about right there is he can stick. He's not a real big guy. That's Ryan. That's some really good lower body explosiveness right there.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's also really nice short area explosiveness to be able to defeat that block by the tight end. It's trying to down block on him, right? I mean, that's a lot of impressive stuff on that play. I mean, to your point, it's a short area player, I believe, is what we're seeing with Taebron. At least that's what his film shows you, because he plays in a lot more tighter spaces than increased space. But right here, I mean, he's working against 87's a big kid, man. It's a big tight end, and he's able to fend and fight and be able to defeat the block. Yeah.
One arm. And that's the thing too, Ryan, is it's really good technique there. I mean, he plays more. I mean, he has better defensive end linebacker technique than he does safety technique right now. I mean, just because of the nature of what he was asked to do. So that's and he plays in a really good area. That's the other thing. For those of you who care about, you know, the level of competition of a team, that's something that he obviously does very well. He is a much better tackler, guys. Ryan, I don't know if you watch like the individual game highlights of him or not, but the one thing I noticed is he's a much better tackler in these type of situations than he is in space. Yes. He can hit in space. Now, he can be a good space tackler, but he has a lot of he'll overrun plays a little bit. You know, so there's some things in those regards where you just got to say, hey, man, you know, settle down, come to balance, and then strike. Because the thing that you see in a lot of these films, Ryan, he doesn't need a full head of steam to lay a good tackle, a good smack on somebody. And that's where that, you know, you see that short area quickness. Well, a lot of that comes from short area explosiveness. And that comes because you have you have some coil in the lower body. And that's certainly something he brings to the table.
Yeah. And he's just one of those kids that always does seem to be around the football, right, Brian? Like, I mean, there's concerns that there always will be, but for what it's worth, on a really talented defense that has a lot of Division I football players, seems like he's in on a lot of tackles. Seems like he's in on a lot of fumble recoveries. Seems like he's in on a lot of plays, which can't really quantify with a 40 time all the time. You can't really quantify with height, weight, arm length, all that great stuff. Some guys just have a natural understanding for where to be on a football field. And I think that he has a little bit of that quality.
If we're going to be consistent, that's one of the things that we praise, or at least I praise Teddy Rizak for, is Teddy Rizak's a heck of a football player. You know, he's very athletic. The question is, okay, but does the size project, right? Well, with this young man, the size isn't the concern. I have more athleticism concerns, but the size isn't as much of a concern. The short area quickness isn't a concern. And I'll say something too, guys, is just watching this film, Notre Dame would be very smart to continue recruiting the safety position in the class. If let's just say that when Bronte Johnson announces on Saturday that he picks Notre Dame, just for argument's sake, okay? If they do get Bronte on Saturday, they better keep recruiting safeties in this class and try to get a fourth guy, because if you're able to get a fourth guy, I'll tell you something right now, guys, this kid would bring even more value to me as sort of a nickel rover type of guy, where, you know, he's not a true rover. He's not a true nickel, because I wouldn't say that I want him playing 50 snaps as a pure rover like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I'm not saying I would necessarily love him playing in the slot, covering all day against USC, but getting him against some of the teams that like to run a lot of screens and quick game and things like that, he can play in that second level, guys, because he does have that short area quickness. Pretty good feel for the game, I would say, Ryan, wouldn't you? I mean, you see him coming to, like, here's an example. You saw the batted ball earlier, you know, comes to balance. Like, okay, you're trying to fool me here with your action, so I'm going to come to balance, be patient, and then go make a play. And those are the things that you like to see.
And I think you have to remember on this film is that he's also playing a position that he's never played before. It is in his year as a starter, right? Like, he's playing this rover spot out of necessity. And I think that there's still some easy football IQ and instincts that you can get off of this film, as far as his ability to read and react effectively and be a guy that can diagnose pretty well. I mean, he makes a lot of plays coming downhill. He makes a lot of plays like that one. I mean, that's a tremendous play, being able to bat the ball up in the air and to be able to react quickly. Like, he does some really nice stuff. It's just about answering all the questions, not just the ones that there's, because that's the thing, guys, is that you can have some pause on players at times, right? But it doesn't mean that they don't bring anything to the table, right?
Right.
Like,
this guy doesn't suck. This isn't like, why this guy shouldn't be playing Division I football. It's not that.
Exactly. And he did have other Division I offers. So this isn't like Notre Dame was his only Power 5 offer. Like, that's not what we're looking at here.
Right. Vince, anything that you want to add about this? Because I know, like, for you as a high school football coach, I mean, this is the kind of kid you'd be putting on the second level and just wreaking havoc in space and coming off the edge.
100%. That's exactly what I would do with him. I wouldn't. Maybe this isn't a good term to waste. I wouldn't waste him in the back. Like, I want him closer to the line of scrimmage so that he can do things like, like he's doing on video here, on tape here. He's good at block destruction, which I like.
Real quick, let me just interrupt this real quick. Do y'all know who this is blocking his punt?
Minich.
Yes, sir.
It's just a lucky guess.
But this is the thing I want to point to, though, right? And this is where some of the concerns are. Look at the speed that Ben Minich shows in his play, and you're just not seeing that. This explosiveness that Ben Minich shows in his play, you just don't see that from Taebron at this point in time. And I think that's a little bit of the concern that there is in this particular situation.
Oh, absolutely. He does lack the explosiveness on film. Now, he had better straight line speed there than he did in the other fumble pickup that he had earlier in the highlights. And so that part is good. There's things to like on this film, but I'm going to reserve judgment to a degree because I want to see his senior film of him actually playing safety. Right. I mean, again, if I'm coaching him, I'm putting him at the second level because that's where he's going to be most effective for me. He's being recruited as a safety to Notre Dame, so I want to see that film, after his senior year or halfway through his senior year. That's going to mean a lot.
Yeah. You know what he looks like to me, Brian, is like he reminds me of like the absolute Jim Knowles rover in his defense, right? Like, can you see this kid end up being like a Tanner McAllister type of football player, like just a scrappy, good football player, like
not quite as smooth, but yes.
Yep.
And the guy
destruction here is
and the thing about like Tanner McAllister, Ryan, is that's not a guy you wanted to leave in coverage. Look what they got him matched up in a one-on-one against Notre Dame in the first drive of the game, and look what happened. Lorenzo Styles smoked him, right? But what Jim Knowles was able to do with Tanner McAllister, especially at Oklahoma State, more so than Ohio State, was protect him with a safety over top. And then now you allow him to be more of a downhill player, Ryan. So I think that's a good comp. And he's got more size than Tanner did coming out of high school, too. A little bit more length, obviously, at this point in time. So, again, there can be some value, but the value here. But if you're being honest, you have to be able to look at it and say, hey, look, this kid brings some value. This kid brings some traits to the table. But if you're also being honest, you have to be able to look and say, but he just doesn't have the athletic profile that you expect Notre Dame to be getting in the secondary. And I think that's the concern that I have. Is that when I watched him work out at camp, when I watch him on film, this kid's a heck of a high school football player, but you just don't see that explosiveness, that range, that ease of movement that you expect to see from a big time football player. I mean, we had some concerns about Ben Minich last year during summer, but even then, Ben Minich was a much better football player at that time than Taebron was. But as you guys said, maybe part of the reason he's not playing to that speed, because this is the point I was making earlier. He doesn't move like a guy that, like, guys, let's be honest, a 4.58 for a junior in high school is actually pretty solid. It's not great, but it's solid if we're talking about real times, not. And when I say 4.58, that was the Notre Dame coaches trying to get a real read, not trying to give some puffed up 40 time to make you want more people to come to your camp, right? It was hey, let's really gauge what this kid can run. And then you see plays like this, and like, this is not a 4.58 kid. This is a kid that's maybe not a 4.58. And part of it is I still think he's learning to turn loose on the football field. But this is where, if the coach is correct that this was new to this kid, he'd never really played this position before, then if we're going to be consistent about things we've said in the past, if a kid's not certain of what he's doing, then he's not going to be full speed all the time. But the thing you always see, or you see a lot of on this film, is stuff like this, guys.
Yeah.
This is a really well-timed, instinctive play. He also doesn't give away that he's going to try to break it down. He's able to quickly react to this and break it up. And Ryan, you talked about this earlier. He does this a lot on film. He does stuff like this a lot on film.
Yeah, the bootlegs don't really work against him, man. Any nakeds or anything like that, like it's not a good thing to go at this kid as far as on the edge. But I mean, he does a really good job. He does. He has fast hands. He actually does a pretty good job setting a firm edge for a guy that, again, is a safety playing linebacker playing on the line of scrimmage a ton. Yeah,
he's setting the edge.
And another thing that I think is interesting, guys, is that he ran a 4.58. But now he's up to about 185, 190 something pounds compared to the 170.
Is that what the coach said he was?
Yeah.
Okay.
He said that he had a big weight gain this offseason.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Ryan. He didn't look 170 at the camp. He definitely looked at least 180 at the camp.
He said that he might be closer to 190 right now. Okay. So, I mean, he's had a weight gain. He just ran a pretty good 40. Maybe there was just a maturation that happened this offseason where he took that next step as an athlete. Like, that's always possible too. There's some guys that develop just a little bit later than some.
The only issue that I have about that, he ran a 4.3 in the shuttle and just looked a little tight-hipped. But that's where I kind of come back to, guys, is part of how I will evaluate this pickup when it's all said and done is basically saying, okay, what else is in the class? That's really what it comes from. Is, do you get a fourth guy? Do you get somebody in the class that brings a higher profile that you can then say, hey, we can use this kid as more of a niche guy, because now as more of a niche guy, a second level player, a nickel rover, like you said, Ryan, like the way that Jim Knowles uses that player, now all of a sudden you're talking about a kid that the issues that I have, the long speed, the range, those type of things, you can mask those and play to his strengths. Isn't that what we always preach? Put a kid on the field and play to his strengths. This kid brings some strengths. This kid brings good short area quickness, good tackling ability, good block destruction, which is a huge problem for the Notre Dame safeties. Huge problem.
And that's probably one of his best attributes right now that I'm
Vince.
seeing on film.
Exactly. Vincent, as you know, too, that's also something very important for a special teams guy.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, no question. And that's where he could be effective right away. And I understand why people aren't super excited. I get it. That's fine. That people are entitled to their opinion. But you have to also recruit your entire roster. And I'm not saying they're recruiting him to be on special teams, okay? But let's say 4 years from now, he just ends up being a really, really good special teams player for you. Is that an unsuccessful kid that you recruited?
No.
I don't think so. I mean, in my opinion, I don't think so. Because you need those guys on the team. Those you need those kids. Now, is he going to stick around if he's only on, all of those things obviously come into play, but you need effective special teams. We just saw it last year, what a really good special teams can do for your team, right? Marcus Freeman is huge into special teams, all right? There's no doubt about it. Coach Biaggi was talking about it all day yesterday at that camp about how he loves working for Coach Freeman because Coach Freeman loves special teams. Well, I think you just got an early, really good special teams player at the very least in this case.
This is a little bit of the issue that I see, guys, is this is really tight transitions here. And I saw a lot of this at the camp. And that was my one concern, which is why you say you want this kid being able to keep things in front of him and being able to play downhill. If you can keep things in front of him and play downhill, the film looks a lot different.
Right.
This is also an example of, I always say, guys, kids put things on their highlight film that aren't actually highlights. Hey, buddy, this actually isn't a highlighted view. Yes, I know you caught this kid who's not that good, but don't let him get behind you to begin with. But the point is, this isn't what you should be asking this kid to do. Hey, go play in coverage.
Right. No.
Right.
He's not a space guy.
No. If you're going to get him, add him to it. But to your point, Vince, like here's another counter argument. Ryan, I don't know if you'll remember this name. I know Vince will. I think people know my stance on this offer from things we've talked about in the past. But I'll say this too: he's not John Turner. Meaning, like you want to talk about a guy.
I remember John Turner. 31,
like,
right? Number 31.
Yes, that guy shouldn't be on scholarship at Notre Dame. No disrespect to the kid, but he's just not that good of a player.
Didn't they try to move the linebacker, didn't they?
Yeah, and he didn't really do a whole lot. But like, this is a kid, as you said, Vince, not every kid is going to come and be a starter, an All-American, or whatever the case may be. Some kids are going to come here and say, you know what? This kid's fired up to be here. This kid's going to give everything he got. This is a nice little edge blitz by Ben Minich here. So I love the speed and closing ability there. But what you are at least getting, to your point, Vince, I think this is a great point by you, is you're at least getting a kid. Look at this block destruction. Like, seriously, guys, he plays more like a defensive end and a linebacker than he does at safety. Like, he puts this kid on his knee. He's got some pop. He really has some pop. But, Ryan, that also adds to what you were saying earlier. If you put him in the slot, using those hands to reroute and jam with help over top with the safeties, there's some value there in that. If we're trying to look for things that say this kid can bring to the table. So, but I think those things are also this right here, guys. You know what I'm seeing? You know what coach think is probably most fired up about this kind of play right here? Vince, you just said it. It's Marty Biaggi.
Marty Biaggi. Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Yep. And I'm saying that's the floor. Like that,
sure.
that is, and I'm not,
Well, I think you could argue it's also the ceiling if
you
we're
could.
being honest, right?
That's fine.
That's the thing, right?
I get that. That's
But that's
why
okay, Vince. That's
yeah,
okay.
right. And
Bo
again,
Bauer never turned out to be much more than a special teams player.
sure.
And he's one of the best special teams players Notre Dame's had in 20 years.
Yep.
There's value to that.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. And if they end up going with 4 safeties and it's the 2 kids that are committed and then the 2 kids that I hope that they get, are we upset that this is
I feel a lot better about this.
Right. Isn't that now maybe he's your number 4 safety. Okay. That's fine. But you got 4 safeties at a position of need. And we can all say that if they do end up getting those other 2 who have not committed, I'm not saying they are, but if they do, and that's your 4 safety class, I'm okay with it. I really am. I think that that's a win in the 24 class.
Right. So, guys, obviously, an interesting pickup for Notre Dame, to say the least. The rest of his highlight film is just him doing pretty much this over and over again, which we're getting close to. I like that compete right there. Now, this was with him closer to being 170 pounds. That's the other thing to keep in mind, folks, is that was closer to him being 170 pounds. And he is going against, like, I'll tell you something right now. Like, okay, I used to coach at Wittenberg University, which is in Springfield, Ohio, not that far north of Cincinnati. And the league he plays in, Ohio has great Division III programs, some really good Division II, 1AA, MAC type of programs. MAC, whether it's the MAC, the Division III level, we recruit the mess out of this conference. We recruit the absolute mess out of this conference, meaning there's a lot of good football players there. Not all of them are Division I guys, but there's a lot of good football players there. So when you're showing some ability in those instances, then you're getting a kid that's at the very least a quality high school football player. Right. Now the question is, can you develop him to play at Notre Dame? Because if we're being honest, I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, now that he's committed, this is a guy that I would have taken if I was Notre Dame. I'm not going to lie to people and say that. But I also think it's important for us to point out that there's some value that this kid does bring to the table. And there's enough there to say I'm willing to have some trust in people that have sent us, that have steered us the right direction before. I think Brian, the question Brian, now. Go ahead, Ryan.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, because I've just seen a couple comments in the chat. Guys, this was a player that was also offered by Kentucky, West Virginia, Pittsburgh.
Duke.
Like, stop acting like you beat nothing but MAC and FCS teams. Right. Like, you beat some Power 5 schools for this kid. Can we just not be that disrespectful on the kid's day? Right. That's all I wanted to say.
And there's a time and a place for all that stuff, guys, and this ain't it, right? But here's the thing now. This is the important part. Let's talk about what's next, fellas, because I think ultimately this commitment will be defined by what's next.
Sure.
And what does the staff do next? Obviously, Bronte Johnson commits on Saturday. We'll have a live show at that time to discuss whatever decision he makes. We all know that Notre Dame wants Bronte. We know that Notre Dame is in a great place there. If they're able to close the deal and get Bronte, that is your alpha at safety in this class, right? And I'm also a lot higher on Kennedy Urlacher than most people are. That's a really quality 1-2 punch. This kid would be your 3. I don't necessarily love the idea of him being the third of 3 safeties in a class when you only had 2 last year, which was short on numbers, and you completely struck out at safety in 2022. Now, the thing that helps Notre Dame a little bit is the fact that Antonio Carter comes and has 2 years of eligibility left. Sure. Plus you have Ramon Henderson with eligibility left. Plus you have Xavier Watts with eligibility left. And then, of course, Ben Minich and Adon Schuler. So but now it puts a ton of pressure on you to now go out and get numbers and impact talent next year with a coach that honestly has not shown the ability to go out and get impact talent from a depth standpoint as a recruiter. So there's legitimate concerns there. So that's why if Notre Dame is smart, they will continue recruiting top of the board safeties. That means, to me, my opinion, still recruiting Malcolm Ziegler. That means still recruiting, the DeJuan Lanes and the Jalen McClains. And I mean, Ryan, there's a long list of safeties they've missed on in this class, a very long list of safeties they missed on in this class. And to me, if Notre Dame says, hey, we're going to take this kid, because we have said it before, we said it about Clemson. We've said Notre Dame needs to do this. It's easy to say it in theory when you're not looking at the film that you need program guys. You need that. But then you take one and it's like, I don't know if I feel good about that, right? I mean, that's the dichotomy. In theory, it sounds great. This is a great program guy, meaning to your point, Vince, even if the ceiling is 3-year special team starter, there's value there. He's going to be bought into what you're trying to do as a program and all those type of things. He's not a kid that's going to leave in a year because he's not playing. And now you're screwed and you're back to square one, right? So that there is some value there. But the thing is but the value comes from what's around him. That's the difference. That when Notre Dame would make moves like this in the past, they would convince themselves, no, this kid's better than he actually is, and then not keep going after other guys. And so that's what's going to tell me a little bit about this Notre Dame coaching staff is what do they do afterwards? Because they've had a lot of misses. And I'll tell you something else that really hurt Notre Dame in this class too, guys, is the fact that Davis Andrews decided to reclassify. Because for a long time, in fairness to the coaching staff, I think this is a point that has to be made, guys. They were under the impression they were going to get him for a long time. They felt good about landing him for a long time. And it wasn't until recently that the whole going on a mission thing out of high school became a thing. Well, by that point in time, certain guys they had passed on are off the board now. So
Sure.
I kind of am sympathetic to them in that regard. But at the same time, you've got to be prepared for those type of things. So as you look around the country and you see different safeties on the board, you got to say, hey, look, if you're convicted that Oliver Miles can play for you, then stay on him. If you're convinced that other guys can play for you, then stay on them. That's going to be the key for me. And then if you go out there this year and the safeties do play well, maybe you can convince one of those guys. So I think that to me is ultimately going to be what determines what's next for Notre Dame is what do they do if they're able to get Bronte? Do they just say, hey, we're done? And we like where our current roster is with Ramon Henderson and all those guys. And for 2024 guys, they're correct. They don't need a fourth safety in this class for 2024. Here's my concern, though. If you don't take another guy, yes, you're good for 2024. You've got Xavier Watts, Ramon Henderson, Antonio Carter, Ben Minich, Adon Schuler. Ben Minich had a great spring until he broke his hand. Adon Schuler, who the staff is still high on, even though they didn't get to the spring. You've got Bronte Johnson. You've got Kennedy Urlacher. You don't get down to this kid till you get to your 8th safety, right? You guys get that? Here's the problem. Carter, Watts, Henderson, all gone after 24.
Right.
And one of your guys that you like a lot, Adon Schuler, is just coming off of a pretty significant shoulder injury. That's the problem where now you're an injury away from in 25 or 24, thank you, being very thin. And that's why my point is I still think going after a fourth safety in this class becomes a little bit more valuable because you have better numbers there. But they're also, to me, a fourth safety allows you to say early on, if this kid can't stick at safety, let's say he comes in and you're like, he can't play in the third level. He just doesn't have what it takes to play there. If you don't have the depth, Ryan, you got to keep him there. But if you have the depth, you can say, you know what? He can't play here, but you know what he can do? He can stick. He can get off blocks. He's good in short areas, which guess what? Fits very well with the position we have on our defense, and we can move him there. And so it's also good for this kid, if he isn't good enough to play safety, to still bring in another safety because you can still move him and not have to wait till 25 and 26 when you've completely restocked your depth chart, hopefully, to be able to move him. So that's why those are all the reasons why I still say a fourth safety is something they should pursue. Ryan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, because I think a fourth safety is very important, not only from the future aspect of working towards 2025, but also, Brian, I think that right now with where you are, Bronte Johnson is the true work from depth player, right? A guy that can play free safety, a guy that can rotate to the middle of the field, a guy that has a lot of range. Your other two safeties in this class now, aside from that, are guys that do better coming down towards the line of scrimmage, right? You have Kennedy Urlacher, who is more of a let's run the alley, let's get downhill a little bit. This kid that you get today in Taebron Bennie-Powell, that is 100% his game, a kid that you want to get towards the line of scrimmage. So I think not only 2025 of just restocking players that you lose, I also think that you don't have enough of the style on the roster of a Malcolm Ziegler brings to the table, for instance, that Bronte Johnson does bring to the table. You need guys that are more comfortable working from increased space. I just don't think Notre Dame has a ton of those guys. And after Xavier Watts leaves, after Ramon Henderson leaves, you just are kind of struggling for that type of
You
player.
got a lot of
Ben,
alley safeties, Ryan. That's exactly what you have. You have a lot of downhill safeties, and the reality is you can't win in college football against the Alabamas, the Georgias, especially the Ohio States, if all your safeties can do is go downhill. Now, that's why Bronte Johnson's so important, Ryan.
Yes.
Because I think Bronte is the one guy that brings true middle of the field length and range. That's also why Malcolm Ziegler is a guy that I would like to have, because he is a run guy. Now, some of the concern people have with him is he doesn't hit. And my whole thing is, are you going to take a chance on a guy that can hit but can't run, or a guy that can run that maybe isn't a hitter right now as a corner? To me, give me the flipping guy that can run, and we'll see if we can develop into a hitter or not. Because the other kid, you're not going to turn the other kid into a 4-4. I don't care how hard you try. I got a better shot at making Malcolm Ziegler a good tackler than you do turning this kid into a 4-4 flat guy or a sub 4-4 guy, right? I mean, that's the reality of the situation. Right. So that's why I think they should take both of them in this class, in my opinion. That's where I'm at. Now, we'll find out if the Notre Dame coaching staff agrees or not. We don't know the answer to that, but that's where they need to be, because I think, Ryan, you nailed that point perfectly. There's just not enough safety that you're bringing in that can do some of the flip your hips and run stuff. That's not a Don Schuler's game. That's not Kennedy Urlacher's game. Although I've argued that I think Kennedy at least has the athleticism to do that. He just doesn't, he's not asked to do that in high school, but we'll find out. I mean, we'll find out, because we don't see him do that a ton. You know, I think Ben Minich has more of that ability than some others, but I think Ben Minich can play center field. The problem is, I think if you are doing that, like, here's what I'm saying, Ryan, and I want to get your thoughts on this. And Vince, you can speak on this too. I think Ben Minich has the athleticism to play center field. The problem is he's so good around the ball that you're kind of taking away what he does best by asking him to play center field. That's a little bit of my concern, but at least he can do it. And so then it's like, okay, but if you're going to have him do that, are you now putting him in position to play to his best ability? Because as we saw in this film, when Ben Minich is attacking the ball, he's really good. He's really good. So,
well, I mean, I've thrown out the idea of Ben Minich maybe even getting some time at nickel in the past, right? Because I think that his short area stuff is actually very good, and on top of his range on the back end, I think personally for me, I want a room balanced enough where I can answer either question without having to worry and to lose sleep at night, right? Because like where you are right now in 2025, barring some big gets over the next couple of years, you're not going to be able to put Ben in at nickel, most likely. Right. He's going to have to play in that role. And again, I think he can play very well in that role, but I want the opportunity as a coach to say, you know what? We're good back there. Ben, you're starting nickel, brother. Move up there and you're good.
And I don't even just mean nickel. I just mean as a safety that's rolling downhill a lot, even in a too high where he's the guy that comes down and plays in the alleys. I really like him in that role. I will say this, ideally, you'd like to have two guys that can do that. So you can go two guys can roll to the center and guys that can roll down on the field. And the problem that Notre Dame – I was going to say this, Vince. The problem that Notre Dame has had in recent years is they've had too many safeties that were good at one thing and not good at all of it. I think
which made safety play predictable. That's the problem. You can predict where things are going to be based on where your safeties are and where they're lining up. If you could have two guys that do both things really, really well, now, I mean, the sky's the limit for how you can roll coverages and you can bring guys down and you can, there's a million different things you can do because you can disguise it better. It doesn't have to be obvious, right? So, I mean, just like they used to do with Kyle Hamilton, maybe he was going to roll down. Maybe he was going to play center field.
Because I think we all agree that Kyle Hamilton was really good coming downhill, but Kyle Hamilton could also play center field if that's what you asked him to do when he was at Notre Dame. Yeah, I think Ryan, I don't know. I heard he was like over 220 pounds this year. Like maybe he's kind of being built into not that guy. But when he was at Notre Dame, Kyle Hamilton could do whatever the heck you needed him to do.
Correct.
I mean, that's the reality. Yeah, but he was that kind of player. And Harrison Smith was like that. Harrison Smith was a really good downhill cover four kind of guy. But if you needed Harrison Smith to play center field, guess what? Harrison Smith could play center field. They haven't had a lot of guys like that. And, of course, those are 2 first-round draft picks, guys, right? And so a lot of teams haven't had that. But I think that's something you need to do. That's what made Peyton Bowen such an impact talent. That's what makes Caleb Downs such an impact talent, because they can do everything. And the reality is Notre Dame has not been getting those kind of players. I don't think Bronte Johnson is that guy yet. What I'm excited about with Bronte is he has the potential to be that. He's got the God-given ability to be that. He just needs technical work and weight room work and some things like that, but the tools are there. And that's what I like about him.
He's a freak athlete.
Very much so.
Bronte
very
is.
much so.
I mean, yeah, he's one of those guys that can 100% play from depth. Like, there's no doubt about that. And you need those guys, man, because, I mean, even besides just kind of fitting everything together, it's also so valuable at times to have a guy where you can just say, hey, man, you got to play the middle of the field, and then we're going to be able to do whatever the heck we want in front of you because you can erase mistakes. You don't have enough erasers of mistakes on this defense. Kyle Hamilton, as inconsistent as it was a little bit his last year, he could erase some mistakes, man. That play against
he was inconsistent for him.
Like, right.
He was inconsistent for what he was the year before. He was still better than most people say.
I mean, he still went
when he wanted to play.
He went 14th overall in the draft.
Right.
So, like, still an excellent football player. But I just think about that Florida State play where it's like, if he isn't that much of a freak, that's probably a touchdown, you know? And it's just he erases mistakes. You need more guys that erase mistakes. And I just don't think you have enough of those guys right now.
Right. And that's going to be the charge moving forward. And that's also something, too, where I do think Notre Dame – here's another angle on this, too, guys, is I don't think the whole keeping your eyes open thing is only for safeties. I would do the same thing at cornerback. And we've talked, obviously, about Caleb Beasley. If there's some cornerbacks out there, then I would say you could still bring in one of those guys because I think there's some guys at cornerback that can move to safety as well and give you some of that range, that type of ability that we're talking about. And so those are aspects of it that I think we would need to see them, that we could see them do as well. So that's going to do it for our breakdown of Taebron Bennie-Powell. We're going to go to a mailbag next, but before we do, folks, we'll ask that you do us a favor and give us a like. Right. Give us a subscribe to the channel. Comment. If you're listening to the show live and you want to comment, leave a comment. We'll try to engage with you. Try and be respectful. I had to boot somebody yesterday that was giving you a hard time, Vince, for your comment on the Elite 11 because you said it's a gathering of the best, but then said it really doesn't matter. And he didn't understand that, yes, it's a gathering of the best quarterbacks in the country. That's no doubt. But it's also something happening with no pads and no defense. Right. And he just could not grasp that concept. So eventually he had to go. So we won't be seeing him posting on the board. It's like, no, this is a you problem, bro. So I had your back, Vince.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
But we do enjoy that. If you haven't done so, sign up for the message board. We put something on the board yesterday. People have been asking, how can we support Irish Breakdown? We want to be able to support more and more and more. We put something on that board that explains all the different ways you can support Irish Breakdown. We've got a new way coming that my wife is going to be adding to the site as well here very soon. But we appreciate all of it. And we appreciate the fact that so many people have reached out and said, hey, we want to support you more. How can we do it? So we put something out there to explain to y'all do it. So definitely check that out. Tonight, Vince, I think you are going to be part of the show tonight. You guys are going to have a Notre Dame midweek mailbag. We got something pretty awesome tomorrow I'm excited about. So Sean Stiers has booked Micah Shrewsbury. Yep. The Notre Dame head basketball coach is going to be on the show with us tomorrow night. He's actually going to be on the show live, I believe, is the plan as of right now. So it won't be a recorded show. So Coach Shrewsbury is going to join us. That's going to be awesome. Very excited about that. So we've had Coach Gumpf, the softball coach, who's made 20-something straight NCAA tournament appearances, correct? Yep. When you look at, we had Coach Niall Ivey on the show recently. She is the reigning ACC Coach of the Year. And now we're going to get Coach Shrewsbury. So
Coach Stifler as well.
Yes, that's true. Also, the baseball coach has joined. So that is also what IB Nation is. Sports Talk is meant to be about. It's not just a football channel. And I've had some people say, "Why do you guys always talk about? You got to talk about Notre Dame football all the time?" No, that's what this show is about. IB Nation Sports Talk is meant to talk about all of that stuff, and we're definitely starting to transition in that direction. Vince, of doing more of that. And so we're excited to have Coach Shrewsbury on and follow his career. He's on fire right now, Vince, on the recruiting trail. He's doing a great job. Imagine that. Imagine what actually grinding on the recruiting trail can actually do for your program. It's amazing. It's amazing. Especially
when you have 8 open scholarships. It's you get a scholarship. Let's go.
Yes. So doing a great job. Very excited to hear him and Sean talk tomorrow night. So that's going to be great. So that's why you need to hit that subscribe button, folks, because when those things come up, you'll get a chance to listen to them. So very excited about that. And you can only find it on the Irish Breakdown podcast. So let's do some mailbag stuff, Vince. You ready to read these out, and we'll go rocking and rolling here. So let's start off with this. We got a little super chat action here, fellas.
Super chat from Raymond. Thank you very much, Raymond. Really appreciate it. Says, "Go Irish! Another kid's dreams come true today," and that's the truth.
That's the cool thing about it, right, Vince? Yep. I mean, you had a son working out at Notre Dame. That's why Vince wasn't on the show yesterday, because the camp was supposed to end 11:15. Got over way later.
Yeah.
But to watch your kid there at Notre Dame, I mean, a field that you and I have watched NFL players working, future NFL players, all Americans working out on, and to watch your son do that. I mean, put yourselves for a minute in the shoes of Taebron's parents.
Right. Exactly.
From very small experiences, seem like really genuine. Your child just got an opportunity after working hard for years in the classroom, in the community, on the football field, in the weight room, to say, I'm going to Notre Dame, right? You guys, I mean, we're Notre Dame fans, right? Ryan, you've seen Rudy, correct? Yeah. Or did you tell me you haven't seen Vince? I know you have. But the scene, like one of the most powerful scenes to me, because I grew up as a son of a Notre Dame fan, and I wasn't good enough academically or as a football player to be at Notre Dame. But to the moment where like the dad opens the letter and it's like, my son's going to Notre Dame. You know what I mean? Like,
he gets on the loudspeaker and like has to tell the whole factory. Yeah,
that's such a great moment. And whether that actually happened or not, you and I, and we all know that happens all the time.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that's really cool, is a kid that wanted to be at Notre Dame, competed to get that opportunity to be at Notre Dame, and he's going to be able to play at Notre Dame.
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, like, my kid hit a 50-yard field goal in front of Marta Biaggi. I was like, get him a scholarship. Get him a scholarship. You can do it. Let's go. But yeah, I mean, it was just a surreal experience, and it was awesome, and it was a lot of fun. And you're absolutely right. Like it was awesome. And I can only imagine what it would feel like as a parent to watch your kid go through a camp and then see them offer him a scholarship and, have his dreams come true. So that would be awesome to experience that and to be around it and see your kid experience that. And that's what it's all about, having kids, Ryan. You know this. And I mean, you've seen it before, Brian. It's like you watch your kids and you get to see the excitement through their eyes. And that's the best part about being a parent.
My dogs live the dream every day, man. When we let them go lay out on the deck, you know what I mean? Sadie just loves, you know, that little dip we have in the middle of our yard, Vince?
Mm-hmm.
So she's got this thing now where she lays on the back of the hill looking up, where it's just her head peeking over so she can like see if anything's coming. It's freaking hilarious. But no,
I'm just upset that now people think I haven't seen Rudy, even though I've seen it 97 times.
Well, I wasn't sure there. I knew there was like a movie like that you.
Well, no, my take on Rudy was that Rudy is an overrated movie, but I've still seen it many times.
You might as well. You'd be better off admitting you never saw it.
I've seen it. I've seen it.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, you might want to stay with that. I've never seen
on nights where I'm having trouble falling asleep. I watch Rudy to get myself.
Now you're just trying to get everybody pissed at you. So we're gonna move on and pretend Ryan didn't say that. We might even cut this segment out of the show because I want to still respect Ryan tomorrow. So let's go ahead and move on, Vince.
Oh, we got one from Sean, and question is: do the type of safety Notre Dame is trying to recruit have any reflection on them trying to be in a 3-3-5 base defense? For example, the body types, play styles of players like Urlacher and Powell.
No, Ryan, I don't think so. I'm curious your thoughts. To me, I don't think the coverage structure changes whether you're in a 3-3-5 or a 4-2 based on how this coach runs his defense. And that's not a knock. That's just an observation. I think the 3-3-5 has a lot more to do with how you play the run and how you play your underneath coverage, your second level coverage, than it does your third level coverage. So no, I think if you're going to play cover 4, cover 2, cover 3, cover 1, all those things are going to be true whether you're in a 4-2-5 or a 3-3-5. I mean, because at the end of the day, your back end is still very much structured the same way.
Right.
And so I don't see that being much of a change, Ryan. I don't think that you need to have a the only difference, Ryan, would be is if you're, one of your 5 was going to be a fifth DB as opposed to but that's more of a rover conversation than it is a safety conversation.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it changes the structure. I think, Sean, if anything, what we're seeing is that overhang rover position that we've grown so accustomed to at Notre Dame. You might just be structurally changing what you're looking for at that particular position, is what I think, right? Is that you're still going to be a 4-2-5 base, but when you're not playing nickel, maybe that rover, instead of being a Drew Tranquil-esque linebacker, a Asmar Bilal-esque linebacker, maybe that's more a safety that can also kind of rotate down and a little bit more of a safety body type. So I just think you're just seeing a different prototype of what the rover position might be, more than just changing structurally what the defense is. That's just kind of how I see it.
Which, if we were talking about this young man being that, Ryan, then it would completely change the conversation and would fit more with this. If we were
100%.
talking about him being a guy that is going to provide you rover depth, we would have a much different conversation, in my opinion, about this kid than if we're talking about him being a back end safety at this point.
Agree.
From Archer, our guy from Ohio State, 24/7 put out their 23 bowl projections and had Notre Dame versus Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. Back to Arizona. How would you feel about that matchup? I think it would be a lot of fun to watch.
But I would hope so. Go ahead, Ryan.
I mean, I was going to say, I was just thinking like matchups potentially on the team versus one another. I do think it would be an interesting matchup because Oregon has spent a lot of money this offseason trying to revamp that defensive line, getting Jordan Birch and getting Mateo Uyunglele and getting those cats right to go play defensive line. And with Notre Dame's strength on the offensive line, that would be a fun little matchup as far as, back and forth. And then we could also beat Bo Nix, which would be a great ending to the season.
I knew there was going to be a Bo Nix comment coming in there somewhere. I just love how blatant Ryan was. They spent a lot of money revamping the defensive line.
He's not wrong. It's like
He's not
free
even
agency
wrong. He's completely
Yeah.
correct. I just love how he said it in such a
matter of fact.
thing I like about matter of fact, but also Ryan has a way of saying things matter of factly, but also just kind of oozing a little bit of contempt. You know what I mean, as well, and I absolutely loved it. But getting Jordan Birch, we saw what he did. Kid caught a freaking touchdown pass, long touchdown pass as a tight end in the same game where he's also playing defensive line against Notre Dame. I think the one thing about Bo Nix, guys, is the one thing I would be concerned about is you'd have to find a way to pressure him. Bo Nix doesn't handle pressure really well. I think he handles it well mentally. I don't think he panics, but I think he makes bad decisions when he's pressured. Because there's guys that panic when they get pressured, and then there's guys that just make bad decisions. And sometimes, if you panic, you're going to make bad decisions, but not every guy that makes bad decisions is doing it so because he panics. I just think he's not a super fast processor of things. That's kind of always been a little bit of my knock on Bo Nix. But certainly there's a lot of talent on the perimeter, but Notre Dame also has a great secondary. So that's a good matchup. They don't really have dynamic receivers, in my opinion, on that team. How's their offensive line going to be? But so much of this is unknown because we don't know how good Notre Dame's defensive line is going to be this year. We don't know how all those new guys are going to transition into that defense. So there's still a lot of unknowns about both teams. But I think that'd be an entertaining game. Certainly,
it would be entertaining game. Oh, it'd be entertaining. There's no doubt. I haven't looked, but can I assume that the Fiesta Bowl is not a Final Four game? Obviously,
no, it's not.
So I would be disappointed because that means Notre Dame has 2 losses. I would say, and so I would be disappointed. But I think that would be a fun matchup. If we're just talking about the matchup, I would enjoy that matchup because I like Notre Dame's chances against Bo Nix.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. I think the Bo Nix angle of it is interesting because Ryan and I have had a lot of fun battles about Bo Nix, and I think Bo Nix is a lot better than Ryan thinks that he is. But I still don't think he's an elite quarterback, and now he's getting thrown into top 5 national quarterback and all that kind of stuff. He put up really good numbers in a league that's, let's be honest, is not great on defense. When he finally played a good defense in Utah, they weren't as good. He wasn't as good, Yeah. So you still say, but if you can put pressure on the kid, you still have a lot of chances to make him be successful. Because the one thing about him, Ryan, is that in the first game of the year, he looked a lot like the kid we saw in the SEC. Why? He's playing Georgia.
SEC defense.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I'll say this. He had a great game against Washington State, and Washington had a very good defense last year. Threw for over 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he did very well there. But then against Utah, he wasn't quite as good. He wasn't great in the bowl game. against a not very good defense, but I just don't put a lot in bowl games. So it'd be a really fun matchup. But to your point, Vince, I mean, I guess it would depend on, to me, how they missed. If they missed at 10-2, I'd be a little bummed. If they were 11-1 and they just got a little bit jabbed,
Sure.
or maybe they're just were 3 undefeated teams in the Power Fives, at that point in time, you're like, well, those teams, if Bama runs a table, Ohio State runs a table, USC, you can't have USC and Ohio State run the table if Notre Dame's 11-1. But you know what I mean? Like, there's certain circumstances where you're like, yeah, I get it. I get it.
I mean, it would be disappointing. Like, it would be disappointing that they didn't make it into the Final Four, but you would understand it.
It would depend on why for me.
Let's go out and win this one and get that BCS monkey off your back,
big time.
That kind of thing.
And it's always good to end the season with a win.
Absolutely,
it's always good to end the season with a win.
Steven has a question the other day. Brian Driscoll talked about having a wild series of Notre Dame. Or let's see. Let me back up. Driscoll talked about having a series of Notre Dame doing 30 for 30 on ESPN. Why not go one better and do an IB version like 23 for 23? And I think there's a second part to this.
I didn't see the second part, Vince.
Oh, okay.
I can try it. Let me just
second part.
Let me just see. I can pull it up and see if there's one there. Just give me a second. I'll find Steven's comment there. Here we go. He had one afterwards.
There we go. One a week through the end of the year. Cut in public domain clips and interns from Notre Dame doing the actual video editing, the whole shillelagh.
Well, if you have the time to do all the interviewing to find those people to hire, that'd be great. I do not. I will say this, Steven. Like, I've always, Vince, you know this, man. You've been with me from the beginning. Like, I have very big aspirations for what this is eventually going to look like.
Right.
Will we get there or not? I don't know. I'm going to try. Right. But those type of things would be very fun to do if we could put together videos and things along those lines where we could do type of really impressive interviews and put like a show together where, the other day you said, I'd love if somebody did a show about the 1988 team. And I say, it'd be awesome if we could do something like that, but that's really expensive. And the reason I don't know if something like that will ever happen is because I've always been adamant that I'm not going to build this thing through taking out loans and different stuff like that. Right. I've literally built this thing up from nothing without taking out any loans or accruing any debt. And the reality is it'd be almost impossible unless we have some benefactor who just wants to give us millions of dollars. I mean, that'd take a big investment, to get all the equipment and the people needed for that. But if there's somebody out there that wants to give me, 8 figures to start, the TV version of this so we can start doing that stuff, I would gladly do it. But the problem is everybody that's offered money, that kind of thing, they want that money back, which I would completely understand. That's just not what we do. It's not what we're going to be doing. But man, that'd be fun though, right? Oh, if we're just like, you know what, dude, I want to do a show about this player. I want to do a thing and like do a 30 for 30 type of thing.
Travel and interview people and do the whole thing and put it together.
Could you imagine if you spent the summer? I'm like, hey, Vince, I'm going to have you spend the summer flying around interviewing 8 guys from 88. We're going to start with Coach Holtz. I want you to meet Coach Alvarez and then go to talk Tony Rice. And you know what I mean? Like, we'll go ahead and meet up at the Rocket. That'd be pretty awesome.
Right now, awesome. Like, I'm gonna need you to go play golf with Lou and the Rocket and just interview him while you go. Like, okay,
be a lot of fun, man. Be a lot of fun. But unfortunately, that would also be very expensive. And,
yes, it would. It'd be very.
Vince, you aren't a millionaire. You're not a millionaire.
I've got a little squirreled away.
He would if he didn't have 37 kids. Maybe.
Those dependents.
True.
They really drain you. Let me tell you. Rob with a super chat. Thanks, Rob. Really appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Love these shows. Congratulations to this young man. Will Notre Dame end up with 3 or 4 safeties?
Well, hey, Ryan, that's $1 million question, right? I mean, that's what we don't know at this point in time.
I mean, it is because obviously you feel good about where they are with Bronte Johnson on Saturday, right? So if you get Bronte, you're up to 3 safeties right there, Rob. Will they take a 4th safety to – again, get more of maybe that from depth player that they think they need more of? I think I would as well, just kind of looking at the numbers. I mean, there was a question someone asked about I don't know if we're going to get to it, but like, would you take Malcolm Ziegler or Bradley Shaw? And I'm like, yes to both of those questions. Like, I would take both of those players if I could, right? So I think that I would definitely Notre Dame push to 4. We'll see. I mean, I think it also depends on some numbers at a couple different positions and what you are projecting moving forward. And there's a lot of things that go into it, but I would personally try to push to 4 if I possibly could. Yes.
I think 4 is the ideal number, right? I mean, based on everything we talked about today, the pieces that Notre Dame is missing, the depth, I think 4 is the ideal number.
It's the ideal number if you get the right type of players. And that's why I actually think this kid, Taebron Bennie-Powell, is a good pickup if he's part of 4. Because what I don't want is 4 guys that are just third-level safeties.
Right.
Because then you get into the thing of like, and now you're a little too deep. You got 4 this year, you got 2, you have 6 in 2 years. That's a lot. You know what I mean? Now, I understand you did a restock, but now you've increased the odds that you're going to lose one of those guys.
Right.
But if one of those guys is someone who, like Taebron Bennie-Powell, you say, okay, we're going to put this kid more as a second-level guy, where he's going to play some nickel. He's going to play some, not even rover, but he's going to play some nickel, can then rotate and do other things. I feel a little better about that, depending on the role you're going to have him play. So
agreed.
I would in this situation. I definitely would.
I like him being 1 of 4. I agree with that.
Yep.
Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. Thank you very much for the super chat. I like his high school film way more than the camp film. They should keep him as a linebacker, not so much high on him as a safety. Little concerned.
He can't play linebacker. I mean, unless we're again, I don't even know that I'd call him a rover per se. That's why I'm a rover in certain situations. Is he a guy that you're going to get up to 210 pounds to really be able to do everything a rover can do? Maybe.
Yeah.
But rover, yes. Linebacker, no. But I understand where he's coming from, Ryan, because the kid plays like that in high school. I get that.
I get it. I mean, it's about projecting, right, Charlie? Like, I mean, we could project Jay Nosberry to maybe be a linebacker, an inside linebacker anyway, because he is 6 foot and 210, 215 pounds, right? We're talking about a kid that is 6 foot and a half, maybe 185 pounds. Like, I mean, unless this kid grows a couple inches and has a substantial weight gain, like, it just functionally doesn't make sense to play on the inside of the defense. But Rover at playing on the second level a little bit, like, I could see those things potentially, but he's definitely not an all-time linebacker.
Somebody asked, Pete Weber said, who would be the narrator? Vince would not be able to be the narrator because Vince would be doing the interviewing. Vince, you'd be doing the interviewing. You can't interview and narrate. What are you going to do, Vince? You want to narrate, or do you want to go and interview and meet all the?
All right, I'll go interview. Twist my arm.
You know who would be cool to be? I've said this before. As far as a famous actor, it'd be Jim Caviezel. I've said that before. But I'd be curious what Tony Roberts' voice is like these days. What is he sounding like these days? Because I would love to have Tony Roberts on there some way, somehow. We may just have to buy the rights to his sound because that's one of the things for me when I think of as a kid. And I don't know, Ryan, if Tony Roberts was done when you were old enough to know. Tony Roberts is every the voice of Notre Dame as Johnny Most is the Boston Celtics for Vince. You know what I mean? Like when you think of it, you know, the Boston Celtics, you think, Ian's about to ball, Bird steals the ball. I mean, you just that really grovelly voice, and you're like, if he was doing anything for any other team, I'd be like, dude, what is that guy's voice all about? But he's doing for the Celtics. You just grew up on it, right? And Tony Roberts, to me, when I was in the Jeff Samardzija or the Brady Quinn era, I would actually have the sound on the TV down, and I'd be listening to Tony Roberts. Do the games.
So here's what I would say. If we're going to do this, right, this is our hypothetical business plan, right? We're having this discussion. If we're going to do this and we have to show highlights, you have to show highlights. We're doing the 88 season. You got to show highlights. Video highlights are awesome, but every audio of those video highlights would have to be Tony Roberts. 100%. No TV audio. It's all the radio calls. 100%. That's what you would have to have. And I wouldn't be a part of a project that didn't do it that way, because Tony Roberts is what I think of as the voice of Notre Dame football. Yeah. And when he stopped doing it, it was a sad day for me personally. It was terrible.
What would also make me sad? Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah. And I was just going to say something a little sarcastic and said I want David Attenborough to be the narrator. You know, the guy that does all like the the planet Earth stuff. You know what I mean? Brian has no idea what I'm talking about, does he? He's only a national treasure, man.
Sure. Okay. Sounds good. This is like my moment of the Ryan movies. Is that what we're going through right now? Like this is now my version of that. Okay, Vince doesn't
David
have
Attenborough's
a
like
clue
this,
who he is
this-
either. Look at his face.
David Attenborough's like this old British guy that just does these great voices.
I know
Some British guy doing our show. I love our British fans. We have Irish fans. We have Spanish fans. But we got to get some dude. You got to get some dude. If you're gonna have someone do it, it's got to at least be an Irish dude. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna have someone with an accent. It's got to at least be an Irish dude. But that'd be fun. The only thing that makes me sad is we joke about this is the fact that I wouldn't be able to interview Loose Emoji for it. That's the only part that bums me out a little bit. But yeah, so we'll see how it goes.
Colton wants to know how much blame does Marcus Freeman get for the safety recruiting? He's the lead recruiter, and he did hire O'Leary.
Let's address this when we get to signing day. How about we actually let the class fill out and then see how it goes? At the end of the day, I'll say this broadly. The head coach is always ultimately responsible.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you like the head coach like I do with Marcus Freeman or you don't like the head coach, which I do with Brian Kelly, at the end of the day, the standard doesn't change, guys. The standard is, and this is one of the things we would complain about with Brian Kelly was, why did you let that guy stay that long? And if we get to the end of this season and Chris O'Leary is not doing what he needs to do from a recruiting standpoint, a coaching standpoint, then we can have that conversation. But how about we let the season play out a little bit, right? How about let's wait till we get to December. And Colton, depending on where we are there, this is Colton, there's nothing wrong with your question at all.
Yeah.
It's a very fair question. It's just not one that I really want to address in June because we're still 6 months away from signing day. So all I'm asking is that we just let it play out and then evaluate it. And then if things aren't where they need to be at any position, then we'll have that conversation because at the end of the day, the head coach is responsible for what happens with his football team. So
no, absolutely.
He absolutely, whether it's blaming him for the safety recruiting or praising him for the offensive recruiting, right? That's the reality of it. You are the head coach. The buck stops at you. All I'm saying is the buck hasn't stopped yet. I mean, the class isn't done yet, right? So let's talk again in December. Again, Colton, please don't take that as me saying it's a stupid question or why are you asking? It's a very fair question. I just don't love the timing of it because we don't know what the class is ultimately going to look like, right? If you would have asked, man, was this Chancey Stuckey hire really good last March? I'd have been like, nah, not really. You know, we don't know anything about the guy. But then you fast forward to signing day and you're like, you know what? This guy can recruit now, you know, so let's just let it play out, right? Let's let it play out. I mean, guys, at this time a year ago, nobody had a flipping clue who Brandon Hillman was. No clue. No clue. None of y'all ever would have heard of who. Hey guys, Notre Dame's going to end up getting this Brandon Hillman kid. Y'all would have been like, who? Who the heck is Brandon Hillman? Right. Exactly. So that may happen. It may not. I don't know. And so, Colton, that's the whole point. Is let's just let it play out first, and then once we have all the data, then we can have a conversation about what Coach Freeman deserves the blame for or not, or whatever the case may be. Let's let these next 6 months play out. What's up, Vince?
Didn't BK hire O'Leary, just as a side note?
Well, no, technically, but number one, if he hired Chris O'Leary, that is irrelevant to whether or not Marcus Freeman wanted to have him on his staff or not. Right?
That's true.
He didn't keep Del Alexander,
he rehired
he didn't keep Jeff Quinn, right?
He basically rehired him. Yeah.
Brian Kelly relied on Marcus Freeman to make the decision to hire Chris O'Leary.
Gotcha.
And what I have always said, and I believe you both agree with me, is I actually think Chris O'Leary is a pretty good football coach.
I agree completely.
I think the safeties, I mean, and he's not working. He wasn't working with like the greatest group of dudes last year, either talent-wise or attitude-wise in some instances. I think he's done a solid job with the talent he's had to work with. I do, especially considering his youth. But now it's that time where it's like, okay, bro, you're in year 3 now. It's time for you to put up or shut up. All I'm saying is, while true, there's still 6 months for him to put up.
Sure.
And that's my only point. It's not to defend the job he's done recruiting or anything like that. It's just, it's 6 months left. Let's let it play out. That's all I'm saying. A month ago, there was a lot of concerns about Joe Rudolph's recruiting. Fast forward a month, you got Styles Prescott. You're looking good with Gearby Lambert. And all of a sudden, the narrative has changed. So let's just let all the data come in, and then we'll have a very honest conversation and discussion about where things stand with safety recruiting and what Coach Freeman has done or needs to do at the position. So I just would hope that you wouldn't want to grade my math test halfway through, because guess what? Half my answers would not be filled in, right? So let's just let it play out. Still would have been mostly wrong. I sucked it. Once they started putting like letters and numbers, and I mean like letters into math, and I'm like, what
you weren't
an
algebra guy, huh?
No, it's like, dude, I'm not. You're
Yeah.
gonna need this in your life. I'm pretty sure I haven't needed it, So here we go. All right, JH. I'm being a little sarcastic there. JHT, Vince, let's roll.
All right. How much longer can ND take chances on kids who they project to improve? I'm all for finding talent regardless of ranking, but it seems on defense we're taking a lot of guys who need time to develop.
Fine. Okay, great. I mean, number one, we don't always know that. We all thought Joe Alt was a project that was going to need time, right?
That's true.
We all thought that. He was a 240-pound tight end when he committed. Again, these kids are about a year away from enrolling in high school. Number one. Number two, here's the reality of it, fellas and ladies. Notre Dame is at certain positions is just not going to go get the top players for a host of reasons, primarily because they haven't produced big-time players at that position, right? Why do they get offensive linemen? Why do they get tight ends? Why are they getting certain positions? Because they're producing at those positions, and kids want to come here. So you're not going to get Elijah Rushings. You're not going to get those five-star ends. So what do you need to do? Go find the highest upside kids you can get. Sometimes those kids need talent. I would also argue that some of the people that you think are guys they're taking a chance on, I don't think they're taking a chance on. Exhibit A, Cole Mullins. A lot of people think, it's a project. No, he's not. He's a 6'4", 240-pound kid who plays freaking middle linebacker in one of the best regions in the country, and you're projecting him to an end. To me, he's a top 50, borderline top 100 guy, to me. So some of these kids that I think people view as chances aren't. Bryce Young is one of the guys that I think fill this, but I don't think Bryce Young is a guy you're taking a chance on. Just because a guy has some projectability and may need time doesn't mean you're taking a chance. Just like you're not taking a chance on a guy that you wonder, boy, this guy's ranked really high, but I don't know how much better he's going to get. That was my big concern with Darnell Ewell, is I don't know how much better this kid is going to get, right? And so that wasn't a guy you took a chance on. That was a guy that you thought was a pretty darn good football player. And so when you look at him and you say, man, I mean, that's a highly ranked guy. That's a great pickup for Notre Dame, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why are you taking a flyer on this Myron Tungvaloa Mosa kid and Kurt Hine? Well, guess what? Both of those kids were way better football players in college than Darnell Ewell was, right? So there's always that back and forth. What Notre Dame needs is they need to find talented kids. And if you can't get the kids that are talented and ready to play now, then go get the kids that are talented that might need some time to develop, because sometimes they might surprise you, right? Because we all thought Blake Fisher was going to be ready to compete day one, and guess what? He was. We had no thought that Joe Alt was going to be able to play year one. And guess what? It was a freshman All-American. So I just would say let it play out a little bit, guys. But that, I don't really, Ryan, I don't know. You might disagree with this. People obsess over highly ranked guys. And to me, the biggest difference between a guy like Logan Thomas and a guy like Elijah Rushing is one guy has a higher floor. I don't see a huge difference in the ceilings, right? And so if one guy needs more time and one guy's a little bit more risky, that's okay. That's where Notre Dame needs to be right now at this point in time.
Well, and I think that, look, I mean, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself if you're a staff, right? Because to your question, JHT 1988, if you're taking the upside players, right, the guys that need development, you better be sure that you have the coaches in place to develop them properly. Like, that's the biggest thing. That doesn't make, but it doesn't make them bad players. Like, I think that some people just think just because a guy is a little bit of a developmental player, right, that they're a bad football player. And it's just like, guys, no, that's not what that means. What that means is that maybe they shouldn't be dependent on playing year one potentially. But Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah wasn't ready to play year one. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of guys that we've looked at, some of the best players that Notre Dame has had in recent years, or players that weren't ready to play as true freshmen. Like, that's just not, it's a unique situation. So I just think that we just need to understand it. And then also I think that we have lost sight of the fact. So I saw someone in the chat say this earlier about like this class. And I think we forget sometimes that like CJ Carr, Cam Williams, and like some of these other guys, like they're still in the class, guys. Like I promise they haven't left anywhere. Like they're still in the class. I promise this isn't just like
it really comes down to an obsession,
group.
Right? Ryan, first of all, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah wasn't ready to play till year 3. He was going to play special teams in year 2 had he not got hurt, but he wasn't going to be playing defense in year 2. So would you have said, no, give him up? I want a guy that would have played as a freshman. Or are you willing to say, you know what, sometimes I'm willing to wait for something if it's going to be good enough. The other thing too, Ryan, is there's still too much of an obsession with what the recruiting rankings say. That's the problem. Why do people not like Cole Mullins on this? The people who don't think highly of Cole Mullins, 9 out of 10 of them, it's because of his recruiting ranking. That's it.
Sure.
It's the only reason. It's not film based. It's not stats based. It's not production based. Now, you may think he's not in a top 100 guy like I do, but I don't see how anyone can watch that kid play and not think he's a Notre Dame caliber player if you're looking at the film. But if all you're doing is looking at offer lists and those other type of things, and guess what? You know who Notre Dame beat to get Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, to Ryan's point? Wake Forest, Michigan State, Virginia. That's who they beat for him, right?
You flipped Adi Agandiji from Western Michigan. Like
Western Michigan.
Yeah.
And the only other schools that were looking at him was like Oregon was kind of looking at him, but Pitt was the only other one that was looking at him. That's it, right? Yeah. And so there's the kids come in all different shapes and sizes and I could start naming you all defensive ends in that year that Notre Dame fans would have been way more excited about, but they weren't because they weren't ranked. They ended up, they would have been excited about it, but they wouldn't have been excited by the time they finished their career because those guys ended up not being very good players. And so that's the whole thing is I'd rather take a guy that I know is going to be really good in 3 years than a guy that's going to be pretty good in day one, but that's pretty much what he's going to be. Now, not every kid that's highly ranked is that way. I'm not saying that. I'm making a point. But this is a really good class. And it's one of the most frustrating classes I've had to cover from the way that fans are reacting to it. And I don't understand why, other than the fact that people are just obsessed with recruiting rankings. Mm-hmm. And some of these guys you're taking a flyer on Teddy Rizak because you don't know if he's going to be able to physically pan out. But Ryan, you know, one thing that we do know about Teddy Rizak is he's 6'4" and he can freaking run. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if Bodie Cahoon's going to end up being a player, but the kid is 6'3", 220 pounds, and he can run. You know what I mean? So in a year also, Ryan, where it's not a good linebacker class. So give me a kid like that. Like a lot of people, if Notre Dame would have got a commitment from Chris Jones, people would have been pretty fired up, right, Ryan? He's a top 200 kid, you know, a lot of schools looking at him, people like him, all this other kind of stuff. And I'm going to tell you right now, that kid's he's a number 139 player in the country. I would not take him over Bodie Cahoon. He might be maybe more ready to play day one, but I'm okay not getting a guy like that. Now, if you'd have got Aaron Childs, I'd have been pretty flipping fired up, right? So it's not every single kid, but there's plenty of highly ranked kids that you look at. And Leonard Moore's another one. We had the same conversation about Benjamin Morrison. You know, and it just like, how about you just trust the film and at some point in time trust the coaches until they give us a reason not to. Some of the coaches have given us a reason not to. Let's be honest about that. And we're critical of them. But others to me, it's like, okay, we banged on Al Washington hard last year for recruiting, rightfully so. And he needs to finish off better inside. This is a pretty good defensive end. Guys, if they can repeat Bryce Young, Logan Thomas, and Cole Mullins a year after getting Brennan Vernon, Boubacar Traore, and Armel Mukam at end and do that year after year after year, Notre Dame's going to be pretty freaking good on the defensive line. Or defensive end, I should say. Now, interior, there's some question marks, right? There's some questions that have to be answered. But I feel like because we bang on him, we're just going to ignore everything he does unless he signs a 5-star. And that's just the reality. And it can be frustrating.
It's also frustrating because everyone just kind of focuses on the negative, right? Like, you don't like this commitment, but Notre Dame needs to recruit better. I mean, the recent recruits that Notre Dame has landed are Logan Thomas, Kedron Young, Nate Roberts, and they're in a good spot with Bronte Johnson in a couple days, right? It's like
Kedron Young's a top 100 running back. Dudes. Nate Roberts, one of the best tight ends in the country. Logan Thomas is a borderline top 100 guy. You know what I mean? It's just like exactly.
You're recruiting well. Just because you don't like this particular recruit doesn't mean that Notre Dame isn't recruiting well. It's just.
And somebody's in the chat saying, "Well, give me an example of a team that wins with ranked 10 to 15 ranked recruit." Hey guys, they're ranked 4th and 5th right now. So even there, your premise doesn't hold up. Well, the classes aren't done, and the team's going to catch up. Notre Dame's not done. So I just say this will say, how about we let it play out? But this is a much better class than a lot of Notre Dame fans are giving credit for. Is it that way at every position? No. We just got done explaining that we don't like where safety's at right now. But that shouldn't negate every other freaking position where they're doing pretty well in this class. And they're not done yet. So how about we let it play out? We're not sitting there saying they're recruiting it at the elitist level possible and they can't do any better. But there's a difference between that and a difference between saying they're just not recruiting well. That's, to me, I'm not even going to say it because it's not a very nice thing I was going to say. I'll say this, it's misguided. If you're just going to focus on that and ignore that right now, guys, at this moment, I don't think there's a better offensive class in the country. Now, there's some teams, if they finish with this player, could be in the conversation. Ohio State's a couple commitments at receiver away from being in the conversation, right? Georgia is a Ryan Wingo commitment away from being in the conversation, right? Where you may say, hey, I'll take the Georgia class from the Notre Dame class. Okay, fair. I don't agree, but I also don't think you're nuts for saying that. You know, if Ohio State can add another receiver to go with Jeremiah Smith and Miles Graham, then we can, you know, maybe they get another tight end. We can have that. If they pick up Brandon Baker on the offensive line and Notre Dame gets Gearby Lambert, we're having a conversation about Notre Dame and Ohio State. Bama needs a lot of work to be able to catch Notre Dame on offensive recruiting right now. Clemson needs a lot of work to catch Notre Dame on offensive recruiting right now. That still counts. Just because you know what, Ryan, I'll tell you this. If you could say they would have got Logan Thomas and Taebron Bennie-Powell and take your Teddy Rizak and Bodie Cahoon last June, and this June, in May and June, instead of getting those kids, they got CJ Carr, Cam Williams, Leonard Moore, Aeneas Williams, and got those kids. Now the vibe would be different because people are too
100%.
obsessed with this false feeling of momentum, which I think you pointed out, Ryan, is also false because look at their most recent commitments. They're really good, highly ranked football players. And so that's the other thing too, guys, is they're loaded at quarterback. They have one of the best running back classes in the country. They have one of the best receiving classes in the country. They have a top 200 caliber tight end. And we feel good about them adding one of the best offensive tackles in the country. And they're still in a good position to add another top 100 player at tight end if they can close on Carter Nelson. So let's not ignore that because you're in your feelings about safety recruiting, because you're rightfully in your feelings about safety recruiting. I'm not criticizing that, but don't let that completely cloud your evaluation of the rest of the class. Is there work to be done, Ryan? Yes.
Of course.
But they are doing that. So let's let these next couple, let's see how Kingston finishes up. Let's see what happens with Gearby Lambert, Carter Nelson, Bronte Johnson, these guys before we start making sweeping conclusions about an incomplete class.
Well, I just think it's the world of hyperbole that we live in right now. You know, like everything's the worst of all time or everything's the best of all time. It's just like, no, Notre Dame's recruiting really well. They might not be recruiting a certain position incredibly well, but let's not lose focus of the fact that the majority of the Notre Dame's class is very good in 2024. Like, that's just kind of where I'm at, man. Like,
Ryan, it comes down to we need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, right? We need to be able to point out, hey, they got to get better there. That's not good enough without throwing the rest of it out with it, right? I mean, that's kind of what you're saying, Ryan. That's what I believe is, hey, we need to be able to, on this show, we will always be critical of things that aren't good enough, that aren't championship caliber. We have done that with this staff. We have done that in this show at safety recruiting. But then to turn that into some bigger picture thing that it incorporates the entire class, in my opinion, is misguided. And it's a reaction, it's an emotional reaction to one small data point, which causes you to ignore the rest. And I don't think that creates a very fruitful conversation because we're not arguing the same realities. And that happens way too much when people debate nowadays, is we're not even arguing like from the same reality of the world at this point in time that we're getting into. So I don't get where some of this comes from. It's like somebody said, this is status quo. Name me the last time Notre Dame's had an offensive class like the one they have now. Even if all they get's one more offensive lineman, name me the last time Notre Dame signed an offensive class like this. Status quo. Tell me when it was. You're going to be thinking for a long time. And you're going to have to go back to the Charlie Weiss era to find an offensive. So how was this status quo? So
just looking at the overall ranking nationally every year, like that's just all you're doing there. You know what I mean? Like it's just.
But that has nothing to do with this class. This class right now is ranked. It's going to fall when you don't know that. Because we don't know what other teams are going to do. And Notre Dame's not done. Like, it's not like, Ryan, like last year, By the time you got to end of August, you had everybody you're going to get. That's not necessarily going to be the case this year with some highly ranked guys. But I mean, look, you can't look at this offensive class and say status quo and have any sound argument to make on that at all, in my opinion. And then you add it to last year's offensive class, which has already showed up and shown that they're legit. And again, I just don't understand where this is coming from, some of it. Now, some of it I get. If you want to talk safety recruiting and linebacker recruiting, folks, we've had that conversation. We can continue to have that conversation. But to take it to the degree we're seeing some take it is just, yeah. I want to give some comfort to an Ohio State fan. Casey Tisher says lefty QB bothers me more than it should. I'm with you. I got 2 points for you, man. Number one, I have to show some love to lefties because my wife, my mom, and my grandma are all lefties, so I got to give some love. But last time Notre Dame had a lefty quarterback before he got hurt, so as long as your guy doesn't get hurt, we've seen a lefty quarterback at Notre Dame be a pretty good football player. And there was another kid.
Number 8.
Yeah, there was another kid that played for that school down in Tuscaloosa. What was that kid's name? What was his name? Left-handed guy, top 5 overall draft pick. You guys remember his name?
Nope.
The guy that led the NFL in passer rating last year.
Yeah, he's a lefty. So my man, it's all good. You're good. Aaron Nolan's a good quarterback. That's all I'll say to you, man.
Is it wrong that I know at least a couple of my kids are lefties, but I'm not sure which ones? Is that bad?
I mean, some of your kids kind of look the same, right, Vince?
I mean, I know some of them are lefties, and I think it surprises me every time I see them writing.
Yeah,
whatever.
It still shocks you. Which ones are lefties?
I don't remember. It's 2 of them, I think, maybe 3.
Is Liam one of them?
I don't think so.
So it's the girls then, because I know Dylan's not, right?
He's not a lefty. He throws lefty though.
Okay.
Which I wanted him to be a pitcher, but
so he doesn't write lefty.
No, he does not. No.
Okay, so he's a lefty. He just writes differently. Okay,
correct. Gotcha. Yeah, he throws lefty, but he kicks right. He swings a golf club right.
Yeah, because my wife, I look at it kind of what you do writing. As opposed, like writing. My wife writes lefty, but she shoots and bowls right-handed. She's a little bit ambidextrous. Mm-hmm. So, but that's the first thing we did when we went to the range is we had to figure out which hand she was more comfortable shooting with. Spent a whole freaking day at the range trying to find which hand she's more comfortable with. Then she finds out she's more comfortable right-handed, but she's left-eye dominant. Normally, if you're right-handed, you're right-eye dominant. Right. So she's got to kind of like, it took some work.
Complicated.
It did, man.
I used to hate coaching lefties, man. Hated it.
You know what I found out?
Track. Oh my god.
If in football though, as a quarterback's coach, you actually it's actually better if you really think about it. Because you can look at a lefty
mirror image,
and he can literally mirror you. Where a righty, he's got to kind of like look over his shoulder, or you do, right? But a lefty can mirror you.
Yeah.
And so if you do it right, he can be pretty good. All right, let's keep rocking and rolling here with some more questions.
All right, James has a question. Forgive me if this has been asked and discussed. How much is known about him at safety, being that he sat behind 2 Division I kids, and is there still room for Ziegler if he wants in the class?
I think that last part there's some uncertainty about. I personally would take him. I'll say that. And how much is known about him at safety, James? I mean, that's now James put this question in before we got into the film room, I believe.
I believe that's accurate.
So, that's the thing, James, is we really don't know what he can do at safety. That's where there's some projection. And that's why all of us said, hey, look, however we feel about this commitment right now, and everyone should be this way. I'm willing to wait till senior year.
Yeah. Yep.
And see what he does as a senior. That's what we did with Ben Minich last year. And come to find out, that was a great pickup.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see what he does. But I mean, you have to be willing to let the reality on the data, so to speak, share your opinion. I mean, there's too many people in different topics right now where it's like, doesn't matter what data you show somebody, they're just not going to come off that opinion they've held for 2 years, and it blows my mind. But I think we should all be willing to do that, James. And I'm willing to tell you right now, I don't know what kind of safety he's going to be because I've never seen him play it.
Right.
I have my concerns based on what I saw at camp and what we've seen on film, but he can end up going back there and, man, it's just natural. And all of a sudden he starts playing like a 4-5-8 guy. and say, okay, well, I can live with that because, there's another Notre Dame safety that ran a 4.58 that was pretty freaking good. If you all don't know what I'm talking about, it would be Kyle Hamilton. They had another safety that went to the combine and ran a freaking 4.8. That was part of one of the best safety tandems in college football in 2018 and Jalen Elliott. So, he just doesn't play like that right now. And we'll see if he does. Here's a two-parter, Ryan, Vince, that's going to be more for Ryan. So I'll bring them both up.
From Levi, is there any clarity to the 25 safety board? And part 2, who are the top priorities at safety for 25?
Yeah, I mean, there's some really talented players that are on the board at safety. I mean, my favorite personally is Jordan Young. I actually just had a interview with Jordan earlier today, and I'll have a little bit of a piece on him soon, just kind of updating the recruitment. I think that some of the guys that you're looking at on the list that Notre Dame is very high on right now are guys that one was on campus yesterday at the evaluation camp, and Trey Harrison, who's out of California, player that Notre Dame has taken obviously deep looks at. Trey McNutt out of Ohio is another player that Notre Dame is very high on. I think they like Jordan Young a ton as well. And then Matai Tagovailoa out of Nevada is also a player that Notre Dame is extremely high on. So where are they with some of these guys? It depends on who we're talking about. I think they're in a good spot right now with Trey McNutt. He's an Ohio kid, so there's going to be obviously some fight.
Dad
for
played
Ohio
at Ohio
State. Ohio State.
Yeah.
Yep. Dad played at Ohio State. Ohio State has offered, so you're going to have to fight there. I think Trey Harrison is high on Notre Dame from everything that we have heard. Jordan Young, I have mixed opinions on. I think that he likes Notre Dame, but I just don't think that one's going to end anytime soon. Right. So there are
Remington Moss is another kid they had on camp this summer that has an offer. Ivan Taylor's another kid that they had on campus with an offer too. Those guys are on the board as well for Notre Dame at this point in time. And here's another interesting one for you, Ryan. It wouldn't shock me if at some point in time Dorian Brew ends up being more of a guy that you look at safety. Right now I like him at cornerback, but he's a big kid, and I can end up by the time he's got 2 years of high school left, which is nuts. So he's another guy that I could see there, Ryan. But I'll tell you what, the Trey Harrison kid they had on campus, Ryan, you and I were chatting about this kid earlier. He's a really good football player, and he's really fast. He's just small.
Very fast. Yes,
so I'm curious what kind of push they make for him after he worked out, because I know the staff loves the athleticism. I'd be curious what he looks like physically, because the height doesn't bother me a ton. I mean, I'd like a longer safety. But Ryan, you cover the NFL. There's a lot of 5'10", 5'11" safeties in the NFL. There are a lot of them.
I mean, there's some 5'9" safeties now. The Bakers of the world, the Tyrann Matthews.
But what can they do? What can those guys do, Ryan? They can run.
They can change direction.
Yes.
They can do all that.
And that kid can move. He can run. And he's a willing hitter, Ryan. I mean, but again, sophomore playing in one of the best areas of football in the country. He's a Juniper Serra kid, right, out in Gardena. So he's an interesting kid. I was shocked when I saw his offer list. It's basically just Notre Dame and Boston College. I was like, how does this kid not have more offers? Because it's got to be the size, but the film is really good. I'm curious to hear how he did at the camp this week. But Jordan Young's an absolute stud. But you know who else wants Jordan Young? Everyone.
Everybody.
Everyone. That's going to be one, Ryan. Good, Ryan.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I remember he was a 3-star when they initially recruited him, and I was like, that kid is one of the best players in the nation, and now he's a consensus top 100 player and number 15th overall and on 3. So, yeah.
And if he wanted to be a receiver, I'd recruit him at receiver. I mean, he is a big-time football player. He's going to be one to me, guys, that we've talked a lot about, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, Ryan. We've talked a lot about what would a big season for Notre Dame do for recruiting, and a comment that I've made is that I think it'll have a much bigger impact on 2025 recruiting than it will on 2024 recruiting from a number standpoint. Maybe a guy here, a guy there. But I really think it's going to be the 25 class that is more greatly impacted by the season. And I think Jordan Young, to me, is in my top 5 of players that I think this season could have a big impact on as far as Notre Dame being a player in their recruitment.
Right.
I could see them jumping in with a playoff run, because as you said, parents like Notre Dame. He's interested enough to have visited, so but he's also a kid that's getting recruited by Georgia and Ohio State and Clemson and teams that have something Notre Dame doesn't. rings.
Yes.
And so show that you're that kind of team. And a kid like Jordan Young, obviously, this is the big thing that Marcus Freeman has. This is why this year is so important. I talked about this in a midweek rundown recently. This year is so important for Notre Dame because, Ryan, you know this. There's a lot of kids that are interested in Notre Dame right now that I would say in 25, if they can put together a big season, they can close on that kid. The number of highly ranked kids that have visited campus this spring and summer is very long in the 25 class. It's just they're just waiting on a reason to have more interest in Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's got to give them one.
I agree.
Archer with another one says reports are Gerby Lambert has canceled his Penn State official visit for this upcoming weekend. Do you think he'll commit soon?
You know, I don't know. I don't know if the Penn State cancellation is the reason that Gerby, that I'm going to say the thing that I'm saying now. I think that has as much to do with the fact that Penn State's just filling up on the offensive line and he's not that interested. Do I think he's going to commit soon? Yeah, I think he's going to commit somewhat soon. I don't think he has a date yet, and I don't know that he's even made a final decision from what I'm told. I like where Notre Dame is at coming into the visit to Ohio State. I like where Notre Dame is at coming out of the visit. And so now it's just about closing. So we'll see what they can do. But I don't expect him – I expect him to be committed by the time the season starts.
Okay.
If you count that as soon, then sure. If by soon you mean the next couple weeks, that I'm not sure.
I think soon and summer are synonymous at this point. I mean, we're literally almost to the end of June, right? I mean, and football seasons across the country start July 31st. At least they do in Indiana. So, I would say anytime between now and the beginning of, high school practice, that's soon to me.
Yeah. Vince, earlier we were talking about what it would be like to have your child accepted to Notre Dame. And here's an example here. This is from Thomas Wilkinson. He says, when my son Sean, Notre Dame class of 21, got his acceptance notification from Notre Dame, I wept like a baby. Yep. And I promise you, Thomas is not even remotely close to being alone. I mean, not even close.
I will,
to being alone.
I'll know that my bank account is about to be zero. And, but I'm kidding, obviously. Yeah. But no, I mean, that would just be.
I don't think those are the tears that Thomas. Brian, I need to do more shows.
It's funny because we were actually talking about what would you do if your son was offered like a walk-on spot to the team? I'd be like, where's the FAFSA information? I would be like, we need to apply for every scholarship known to man. Right. But I would tell him unequivocally, you're going. You're going to do this. We'll figure it out. That's exactly right. But it would be daunting. There's no doubt about that. But I mean, I will cry. I'll be the first one to admit it. I will shed tears if that's where he decides to go for many reasons. Number one, lifelong fan. And I know he's a lifelong fan. It's his dream to play there, whether it's soccer or football or whatever. And then, I mean, the fact that he'd be close to home so I could actually watch him do his thing, which would be awesome. So, for all the dad reasons and I mean, it would be unbelievable. There's no doubt. There's no doubt.
All right. That's a moment that would be pretty cool, I'm sure.
Oh, can't wait.
I'm sure.
Yep. Travis with the super chat. Thank you, Travis, very much. Are there any pros or cons for Marcus Freeman and the football program of operating under a new athletic director?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'd say pros or cons. I mean, it just depends on the relationship that Coach Freeman has with that guy and what that guy's priorities are in football. I mean, look, here's the deal, Vince. If the new AD understands the importance of football needing to be excellent, then it'll be great.
Yep.
And then if he's willing to do things that maybe the school's been uncomfortable doing in certain areas, and again, I don't mean paying recruits for any money. I don't mean lowering the academic standard. I don't mean sacrificing who you are as an institution, but saying, hey, you know what? It's okay that we have a top 5 paid coaching staff.
Right.
It's okay that we're doing these things. It's okay that we do that. There's nothing wrong with this. It doesn't sacrifice our Catholic values, to pay our head football coach the highest salary in all of the land. I mean, your AD's number 2, if not number 1 in the last, so why, so as long as you have that, I mean, it'll work. But if you have an AD that doesn't think football should be prioritized and doesn't think that you deserve this and should have that, this isn't important and that's not important. You don't need a meal. You don't need be able to eat here. You don't need to have the best nutrition plan. You don't need this. You don't need that. Then guess what? You're not going to have it's going to be a con.
Right.
But it just depends on that. It just depends on who the athletic director is. In theory, are there pros and cons? Sure. I could give you a long list of pros and cons, Travis, but if I could sum them up as briefly as possible, it's just, do you have someone that understands the importance of football to the entire institution and understands that, and this is something that I'm somewhat cautiously optimistic about with the new AD is, do you have someone that has enough of a business background to understand sometimes you got to spend money to make money?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's to say, we're gonna do this, and we're okay spending more money on coaching salaries or upgrading this facility or that facility, because we know that the ROI on that is going to be amazing,
right?
Because it's going to, if you believe in the people that are running your program, and if you don't have someone that understands that and something is not willing to be bold in some of those areas, then it's going to be a con. So it just depends on the new AD, and I don't know enough about him. I don't think anybody does.
That's
as far as we know what he did at other places, but we don't know what he's going to do here because he's never been an AD before.
Right, and there's too much unknown to really lay out a legitimate pro and con list, right? I mean, look, we're going to find out real quick about what's going on when we hear about the apparel deal, when we hear about the TV deal, because he's going to be involved. Like, maybe less the apparel deal because it sounds like that's going to come out next month, but the TV deal, they got him in now so that he could be a big part of that. I want to see what the TV deal looks like. How pro Notre Dame is this TV deal? If it's super pro Notre Dame, then I feel like he's the right man for the job. You know what I mean? Like, now that's not going to be the be all end all by any stretch of the imagination, but it's going to be a good kickstart to who this guy is and how and what he believes Notre Dame should be in the national landscape and all of those things. So you got those are the two things, the apparel deal, the TV deal are the first two things that are going to kind of give us a sneak peek into what kind of an athletic director Pete Bavacqua is going to be. Now, you said it as well, coaching salaries, upgrades to the facilities, like all of these different things. That's not going to be an overnight known. We're going to have to find out what that looks like, right? But that's all going to be part of it. That's all going to be part of it because we all know we want the Notre Dame staff to be bigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that comes out of the athletic department. Absolutely.
We've confirmed that we have more on it on the board, but we've confirmed that Notre Dame is going to have a new director of scouting. It's a new position. And based on what I was told that position is going to do, it's huge. This is what we've been begging for.
Yes.
You've got your high school recruiting figured out. You got Chad Bowden running that thing really well.
Yep.
You got some of your coaches got to do a better job, but Chad's crushing his job. You need to have someone that does that in the portal that, spends all year, advanced scouting college kids. So when the portal time comes, hey,
then you jump on those guys when you need to.
Right.
Because the portal is becoming a huge deal now. I mean, and even at Notre Dame, it's
even
a huge
for Notre
deal.
Dame, exactly, yes. Vince. Now, Notre Dame has still done mostly grad stuff, but that's okay too.
Sure.
And look, you take this is like the transfer sucks. The way that they're allowing transfers to happen right now sucks, but allowing kids to transfer does not suck, and it's certainly been beneficial to Notre Dame. What would Notre Dame have looked like in 2021 without Jack Cohn?
Mm-hmm.
What would we be talking about this team going into 2023 without Sam Hartman, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, Thomas Harper, and Antonio Carter?
And the kicker and the punter. And
right.
I mean, you name it, right? I mean, there's been a bunch of guys.
Where have they been last year? John Sott, Chris Smith.
Yes.
So that's been good for Notre Dame.
Right.
But do you have an AD that's willing to fight for you with the school to open that up even more? Now, there's going to have to be concessions from the football program. You got to make sure that you're bringing in kids that are going to take academics seriously and can do the work here. Fine, you got it. And if you don't do that, then we're going to take away some of the things we're giving you, right? What we're giving you now, we can easily take away if you're not bringing in the right kids, right? And then it's up to the imperative of the staff really bring in kids that, hey, look, this kid is a 2-year player. He's got time, but you know what? This is a kid we recruited at high school. We know who he is, blah, 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 blah. And we're going to vouch for him. All right, then let's work. So, but you need the AD to fight that fight for you. That can't be a fight that Marcus Freeman is going to win. Marcus Freeman, as important as he is, does not have the cachet. Neither did Brian Kelly. Neither did Lou Holtz to go toe-to-toe with deans from students and all that to say, hey, we're going to do this. The AD does. And that's one of those fights he's going to have. Is he willing to do it or not? That's
Right.
going to be, whichever direction he goes, Travis, is going to determine whether it's a pro or a con. And that's what we'll find out. But it's certainly interesting. Certainly interesting.
Mm-hmm. Another super chat, this time from Wicked Bronco Productions. Thank you very much for that.
Back-to-back from him.
Yeah, nice. I know some people in the fan base hate this commitment because he's ranked outside the top 1,000, but I personally like his tape and I trust Freeman's opinion. Funny, though, that Taebron's brother's name is LeBron, going to be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Look, I hope you're right. That's all I'll say. I hope you're right. I hope this kid can ball. And here's the second one from him.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you so much. What happened with Jamie French and Ryan Wingo, two guys who Notre Dame was all over early on and seemed like they just faded? Chances Justin Scott commits this summer. Heard Notre Dame is trying to get an unofficial from him in July.
Well, I mean, we've talked about the last part. They've been wanting him to come in April. They wanted him to come in May. They wanted him to come in June. They're going to try to get him in July. They're going to keep trying to get him on campus.
Sure.
Nothing happened with Jamie French. He liked Notre Dame a lot. Notre Dame's in his top 5. He's just not going to pick Notre Dame. Look, guys, that happens sometimes. A kid can like you a lot, but just like some situation better. And that's basically what happened with Jamie French. Ryan Wingos is a different situation. He just stopped liking Notre Dame. I think, I can't tell you the reasons why. He said all the right things about Notre Dame, and just I don't think there was an interest there. I just think he was looking for different things. Sometimes it's as simple as this kid goes to a really good private school and he just decides he doesn't want to go to a private school anymore. Stuff happens. I mean, sometimes kids will say, man, I picked Notre Dame because it's just like my high school. And then other times, Vince, why didn't you pick Notre Dame? Because it's too much like my high school.
Mm-hmm.
It just
depends on who the kid is. I mean,
they recruited him hard. They put in the work. I do think Tommy Rees leaving played a role there because he was also very actively involved in that recruitment as well. And once he left, it was, I think they kind of faded at that point in time. But I'll tell you what, I'm totally fine with the receiver class in 24. Jamie French is a 25 kid. Notre Dame liked him a lot. He visited campus, I think, twice, actually.
Oh, wow. Already.
He likes a couple. They made his top. He announced his top 5 yesterday. It was like Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame, I think Florida State and Alabama. I just think he's going to stay closer to home. He's a Florida kid. So that's really what it was going to boil down to for me. But they still like him. Look, guys, you're going to lose kids that really like you a lot. They just like somebody else or some situation better. And that's the reality of it.
Another super chat from Brandon. He says, when will there be a visit for the, quote, July barbecue?
I have no idea. I don't know that they're doing that. I have no idea when that's going to happen.
I thought July was a non-contact period.
No, it's during certain periods, but there's other periods that are open.
Gotcha.
So the whole month's not
not
shut down.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Brian Fit, Let's Go Irish, says, do you think they are recruiting certain players that fit their program and certain schemes they have planned for their future of the offense and defense to become a championship caliber team?
Do I think they're recruiting certain players that fit the program and certain schemes they have planned for their future for the offense? Look, I think that they're getting closer and closer and closer to being a championship roster, but they're not there yet. We've never said that they're there yet. They're certainly heading in that direction on offense. There's no question about that. Defensively, it's going to depend on how they finish this class. Because you had a really good 2023 defensive class. You had a really good 2022 defensive class, other than safety. Notice a theme, right? But your defensive line recruiting, I mean, your 22 class gave you Josh Burnham, Tyson Ford, Aiden Gobira, Junior Chalamaka, Donovan Heinisch. Your 23 class gave you Brennan Vernon, Boubacar Traore, Armel Mukam, Devin Houston. And in this class, you're a defensive tackle short, but it's given you 3 really good players and a fourth guy that maybe doesn't have the ceiling of those other guys, but he gives you that mass, that beef that they've been wanting in the class. So they continue to close the gap. What they need to do now is finish strong in this class to really take a bigger leap towards that. And then hopefully the 25 class can be that 3rd consecutive class that puts you over the top to say, okay, now we're on your level. Now it's time to go out and prove it on the field. That has to happen anyway. But you're still trying to prove it on the field with certain disadvantages. Like Notre Dame can't line up against Alabama or Georgia this year and say, we are better than you everywhere or at most positions. It's like we're hoping that we're good enough in these positions and we can at least stalemate you here to maybe if we can catch a couple breaks, we're gonna win. And that's kind of where it is. You need some breaks. You need to make some plays. You got to hope that the team you're playing you match up better against.
Right.
Where your goal is to recruit to the level where no, we're on your level. We're better than you here. You're better than us there. It evens out. Now let's see who's going to execute the best. They're not there yet. And I think they can get there. It's just going to get there a different way. But some people think that getting there means, you're doing nothing but recruiting 5-stars. And as I've said for years, Notre Dame needs to be more like Clemson than they're going to be like Georgia and Alabama.
Sure.
Meaning finding those right fits. And everyone's like, it's because of Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, Trevor Lawrence was a huge part of that.
Hmm?
But so was Isaiah Simmons and a lot of other guys that some were ranked high, some were not. It's about getting talent and getting talent at the right places and do that, and you'll be okay. But they're not there yet. But they're way closer than they've been at least from a recruiting standpoint. Now we got to find out, Vince, if you got the coaches to develop these kids.
Right.
And when you've only been there for 1 year, that's still a question mark.
Jury's still out. Yeah.
Yep.
Buellsfield Financial Services, Inc. If the Leprechaun had to defend Notre Dame's honor against every mascot on our 23 schedule, how does it fare? 11-1 or different? Okay. Well,
That's
go
an
through
interesting
it?
one.
Should you go
Okay,
through
sure.
it? Like, go through the schedule. I already know one I think he's going to lose to. So
okay, we got to go midshipman, right? Okay. I'll take the Leprechaun, I guess. I
guess. Sure.
I think they're going to lose a couple. I mean, again, he's a Leprechaun, right? I'm taking a Tiger over, and they play 2 Tigers this year.
They do.
They play a Panther. They
Also
play
true.
a Wolf Pack. A Wolf Pack
like a whole
is a
pack.
Bunch of them.
Like it's not just
wolves.
one.
It's not the NC State Wolves. It's the Wolf Pack, right? Anybody watch WCW in the 90s? The Wolf Pack, it wasn't one dude. It was a bunch of dudes, and they all come out and jump you at once. So that's what. So the 2 Tigers, a Panther.
Well, the Chippewas, that's a whole a nation of Native Americans. Am I not wrong? So
you're catching an L on that one.
Catching
Unless
an
you
L
say
there
it's one
too.
Chippewa, then it's like, okay, if you only send out, it's like the beginning scene of Troy, right? You send out your best warrior against our best warrior. Okay, Irish can hold their own in that fight, so we'll call that one. We'll let them, a Buckeye, get out of here with that, man.
It's a nut. You just step on
I'll beat Brutus down, son.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that's just how it's going to be.
Yeah.
Blue Devil, I got that W. All right, because the Leprechaun, he's at Notre Dame. He has the Holy Spirit on him.
Yeah,
Devils can't have any impact on the Holy Spirit. Okay, that's a W right there. Cardinal.
I like the Leprechaun there. I mean, this isn't an Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Right,
so
exactly.
good.
Trojans, they're extinct.
They got sword,
but they're extinct, man. The Trojans died out a long time ago because they fell for the freaking horse thing.
All right,
you know what I'm saying? So you got conquered by the Greeks. You know what I'm saying? Because you guys were, look, they left us a big old, horse. So, yeah, you're gone. You're extinct. You're not even a real thing anymore. We already talked about the Panthers and Tigers. Demon Deacons, again, I don't know what the heck that is, but it's got demon in it.
It's demon.
You got the Holy Spirit. That's a L. And I'm chopping the heck down out of that tree.
Yeah,
Stanford's a tree. Basically, I'm going 8-4, right?
Okay.
I'm sorry. The 3 Predators.
Legit. Yeah.
And, now, again, it is, okay, if I'm an Irish guy, can I have a rifle? Because if I have a rifle, then I'm feeling a lot better against the Tiger and the 2 Tigers and the Panther.
But I don't feel good about the Wolf Pack and the Chippewas. I don't feel good about either one of those.
Well, again, if it's 1-on-1,
right.
Okay, cool.
But if it's the whole nation, it's going to be tough.
But okay, but if it's 1-on-1, right? So then I got all my Leprechaun boys. I've got my
It's like Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
Yeah, man. We got this. Yeah. And then what Leprechaun am I? Am I getting a little crazy, insane, demon-possessed Leprechaun from those stupid movies? Then maybe I don't know. That was a fun question, JB. I appreciate you, buddy. That was a lot of fun.
Brandon says, "Who would you rather have in Notre Dame's 24 class? Granted, KVA commits to Notre Dame, Ziegler or Bradley Shaw? I'm easily picking Ziegler. Who would you pick without KVA in the class? Still Ziegler, in my opinion.
Same. I mean, but if you don't get KVA, then I think you have a shot at getting both of those guys. But I would still take Ziegler.
Okay, so basically 2 spots for 3 people. Like that's the way it's looking.
That's
okay,
gotcha. Much. Yeah, that's. Well, I don't know if that's how. I mean, I think there's a scenario in which the staff would take Bradley Shaw still. I think they'd like him a lot. I'm just saying if you only get Bradley Shaw and Ziegler, I mean, you get Bradley Shaw, you're not going to tell Ziegler no. If you wanted Ziegler, right, and
Gotcha.
vice versa, if you need it, right. So there you go. All right.
From Conrad, why doesn't Notre Dame recruit Bishop Gorman in Nevada more, a private Catholic school that consistently produces top 100 recruits? I believe Alize Mack went there.
They've tried. I mean, they've tried. They tried
Those
to get
guys
Jake
tend to
Taylor,
go-
that offensive lineman, right?
Those
They
guys tend to go
yeah.
West Coast, don't they?
Now there's a 25 receiver that they're in a good position with named Derek Meadows from that school that likes Notre Dame a lot. He camped at Notre Dame, so we'll see if they can close there. But they've tried it. Hey guys, it's not for lack of effort. Remember how bad they wanted Jake Taylor a couple of years ago on the offensive line? It's not for that. It's not for lack of effort. It's not for lack of effort. That's cool. That's no doubt about that. All right. I love some of the people trying to respond like with real responses to our mascot. Guys, come on, guys.
We're just having fun here. I like the lighthearted questions. All right.
I do too. They're fun. That was a great question by JB.
Since we've been talking about 23 for 23 videos, which non-Notre Dame 30 for 30 was your favorite, or have you even seen any of the others?
Oh, I've seen a ton of them.
So have I.
I mean,
it's going to
I
be hard
thought
to
the
narrow
Pony
it down.
Excess one was great.
Yeah.
I thought the Best That Never Was about Marcus Dupree was really good.
That was really good.
The one in the 83rd draft, Elway to Marino, was really good.
I like that one because I like behind the scenes type stuff and like how things went down.
Yeah.
That one was really cool. And it was really cool that the agent like kept notes on like everything that was going on.
Yeah.
And he was basically just sitting there reading his notes. Like that was a cool one. I'll give you that one.
The one on the NC State team that won the championship with Jim Valvano, that one was pretty good. Let's see. There's a lot of others, man, that I really like. Actually, you know what, Vince? I'm gonna actually I have a bunch of them saved on my YouTube TV. I'm actually just gonna pull those up real quick. Yeah. Nice. And just quickly scroll through and see if I can see some that I remember that I'm like, oh yeah, that one was really good. But I've mentioned a lot of them so far. I didn't see that American Gladiators one. That's a new one. I didn't watch that. I did watch American Gladiators as a kid.
I love that show when I was a kid because it was always
on.
Because if I was watching it, that meant I was up past my bedtime. Like it was always on late at night. Yeah,
right. There's a bunch. I mean, there's still a bunch I haven't seen. You know, Once Upon a Time in Queens about the Mets. I haven't seen the one on the Tuck Rule. You know, so there's a lot that I need to actually go back and watch. The Dominican Dream on Felipe Lopez was really good. That one was a really good one. I remember him coming out. He was a really good player. The one on What Carter Lost, that's about the Dallas Carter football team, right? That had all those issues. Yeah, that one was really good. A little bit as well. But did you ever see that one, Vince?
Which one?
It was about the Dallas Carter football team.
I don't think so. No,
that one. It said it was What Carter Lost. That was a really good one.
Okay,
that was a really good one. I'm looking. The U ones were good. I did. Yeah. I mean, look,
the ones about the U were good.
Yeah, Phi Slamma Jamma one was really good. The Trojan War one was really good. Fantastic Lies, the one about the Duke lacrosse team. You remember what happened with
absolutely
fascinating.
Always, I remember.
Absolutely fat. The one on Benji Wilson was really good. Ghost of Ole Miss was really good. You Don't Know Bo was really good. The first 2 years, in my opinion, were really good because those are most of the ones that I've seen. Yeah, there's some good ones, man. Brian and the Boz was really interesting.
That one was really interesting because he's like going through his storage locker and like finding old stuff, and then they would talk about it. And
because he's a really strong Christian now. I mean, he's in a bunch of Christian movies and stuff, and so it's like to see like the man he is now, looking back on the kid he was, and it's just like, you know, you could see some of the hurt. Like, you know, there was one time where his son picks him up and he's like, I want to do this, and he was like, no, man, like, you know, don't glorify that. It was
it was
kind of sad, but also pretty cool.
T-shirt. Yeah.
That and look, this is something that they do a great job of. They do a great job of. You know, I haven't seen the Ric Flair one.
No, me neither. I don't. Yeah.
So yeah, and I think I know what I'm going to be doing tonight if I can't sleep.
Briefly, Brian.
Huh? I did have some issues,
just like for 5 seconds.
Okay,
is when you're talking about the Carter football team.
See, there you go. All right. Here we go.
Sean
Here's some
Kelly.
I think this is one of our. No, that's Sean Duffy. Sorry, I was going to say one of our Ohio State fans, but that's somebody.
Oh,
else.
okay. Sean Kelly says, "Have you heard anything about possibly moving any of the corners who are down on the depth chart to safety? I know you guys were pushing for Lewis before they got Carter."
I have not. They've been very resistant to that for some reason,
resistant.
and I don't quite understand why.
Yeah,
I don't.
Lance Hab, was Rocket Ismail highly recruited, or was he more of an under-the-radar player when he came here? Do we know?
He was very highly recruited. Now, how highly recruited? I mean, that would be more something along the lines of Loose Emoji would have a better answer for that one. But
right. Well, recruiting in 1987 was, or whatever the year, 86, 87, like
it was still big.
Animal.
I mean, he had like the Parade All-Americans and all that kind of stuff. And so I do know that he was highly sought after. I mean, everybody knew about his speed and all that kind of stuff. I mean, and he was from an area where, he played high school ball in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was one of the best states in the country at the time. I mean, he was a known guy. Would he have been a top 10 national player? That I don't know. It was just more of like the Parade All-Americans, and he was. I mean, Penn State wanted him. I mean, they had to battle to get him. But yeah. So I think I know what happened because I accidentally hit play when
Gotcha.
On the Carter one accidentally, and it came up.
Gotcha.
So I wonder if that's kind of what happened.
It probably was because it was real brief. Mm-hmm. That's why I had to ask. I was like, "What did you say?"
Yeah. All right. Here's last couple.
Katie Keevers, how risky is it to recruit a player like D. Andrews who wants to take a 2-year mission? Seems like you lose so much development time being away from football for so long. I've actually wondered this exact thing from Katie because you do go away from football for 2 years.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you look at Utah and BYU, and their rosters are filled with those kind of kids.
Yep, filled. That's why they're so old.
So there's give and take, right? But see, that's exactly the give and take. First of all, I think there's this, and I'm not saying that Katie's this way because I don't know, but I think, and I had this misconception for a long time because as a Christian, when you think of mission, you usually think going to some third world country where,
that's not always the case. Yeah.
It's very rarely the case from what I understand with these kids that are football players. I think Kahuna Kia is in like Raleigh, North Carolina. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, so, some people said that there's restrictions on what you can't work out or what, I don't know, but BYU and Utah do that all the time. And they've never had issues with developing players or toughness or all that. I think because the counter to that, Katie, is when he's a senior, he's going to be 24, 25 years old. I mean, so he's going to be older, more mature and those type of things as well. So there's a little bit of a counter to that. And then, maybe he needs a year to get back in shape and get all that. But I don't think it's a whole lot different than necessarily a kid who had a couple years of really bad injuries. I mean, you think of Drew, Sean Crawford missed a couple whole years of football at one point in time. I mean, missed the whole 2015 season, got hurt in game 2 of 2016. I had practices and all that. I mean, I get all that. It's not a direct comparison, but you get the point, right?
Right.
Is, guys are out of football for a long time. As long as you're not out there like putting on 50 pounds because you're just eating Cheetos and, McDonald's every day, then you should be okay. It'll take you some time to shake off the rust, but it shouldn't take like 4 years to shake off the rust. He should be back. But it's a good question.
Yeah, it is.
Good question. All right, here's we're gonna real quick on this. James Ingles. I don't know James why 247 or anybody else has him ranked or not. I just don't ask, don't pay attention, and don't care what those networks do. To be honest with you, but we'll see what Jerome Bettis Jr. can do as a junior. And if he can play well as a junior, then you'll see more people rank him.
Right.
Because I've heard he's had a really good summer and stuff at camps and different things, but we'll have to see. He's got to, because his film's not great, but he's done well at camps and 7-on-7s and stuff like that. So not 7-on-7s, but like during 1-on-1s at camps.
Right.
And we're going to end with this one from Tyrell Wilson.
Tyrell Wilson with the super chat. I love ending it with a super chat. Thank you very much, Tyrell. It says, was the 47 class of Notre Dame the best ever in college football? 7 of the starting 11 are Hall of Famers. They played 36 games in 4 years and never even trailed.
Well, apparently, according to ESPN, Notre Dame wasn't even the best team of the decade in the 1940s. Did you see that, Vince?
What do they name, like Army or something?
Actually, I think it was Oklahoma. Let me
What?
go back and look. Yeah, it was really stupid. Like Notre Dame didn't have one single team that was like the best team of a decade. It was one of the dumbest things. I mean, I know
Come
ESPN does a
on.
lot of dumb stuff. They do a lot of dumb stuff that's just like you're not even trying at this point in time. But when I saw, and you know who it was from? It's from Bill Connolly. So he did his stupid analytics stuff, right?
Right.
But Notre Dame was number 2 in the 20s because he accounted it towards his stupid,
That stupid formula that he uses.
Yeah. And so he had Michigan number 1 actually in the 1940s. So
Really?
yeah.
Come on.
Yep. So
how many national titles did Notre Dame win in the 40s?
I mean, Vince, they won like 3 out of 4 years.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, like Tyrell's talking about, they went through a stretch before because remember now. Keep in mind that for a couple years during that stretch, like Frank Leahy wasn't coaching them, right? And I think they had some periods where 44 and 45. I don't believe that did Notre Dame have like they had football in 44 and 45. They had Edward McKeever as their coach. They went 8-2, 7-2-1, right? Hugh DeVore was the other one because Frank Leahy was
Often
doing a service, right? And a lot of the players were not there, but Notre Dame in 43. So they won a title in 43. They had the 2 years that Leahy wasn't there. So they went 8. This is what Notre Dame did in the 40s. Okay. So in 1940, the first year there, they went 7-2 with Elmer Layden as the coach. Then Frank Leahy comes in 1941. They go 8-0-1, finished number 3. In 1972 or 1942, they went 7-2-2, finished number 6. In 43, they won the title. They went 8-2 in 44. And 7-2 in 45, finished number 9, and then from 46 to 49, this is what Elmer's talking about. They did not lose a single game, and went 8-1, 9-0, 9-1, and 10-0, and won 3 national titles. Had a couple down years in 50 and 51. And then 52 and 53, they finished third and second. That was actually in the 50s. So, yeah, so they ended the decade. They ended the last 4 years of the decade, Vince, going 36-0-2.
So they had 4 titles in the 40s?
Correct.
So how can you possibly say that another team was better when you have 4 of the titles? Like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Right. Because it's ESPN.
Wow.
And that's
you don't even why are you applying analytics and formulas? Just look at the results.
Right.
Just look at the results.
It's because it's just dumb. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. It's just dumb. And if you look at claimed national titles for Michigan in the 1940s, they had 2 in 47 and 48. They claimed national titles.
Same year that Notre Dame.
Right, that Notre Dame went undefeated. And now Notre Dame doesn't claim the 48 title, even though they went undefeated as well. So it's just stupid. It really is. I mean, but it's ESPN and it's Bill Connolly. What do you expect?
Right.
Exactly. But yes, that was a phenomenal stretch. I mean, best ever college football. I don't know. I mean, that's a different era. And I love the people say, well, if today's teams would play those teams, they'd kill them. Well, yeah, but
it's completely different.
But again,
differently.
Because here's what's so dumb about it. People will say, well, if you put players today back then, but like if you put those players in today's era, they would have also grown up with all the different advantages and things that they had, and so it's why it's a silly conversation to have. And Patrick Duffy noted also that Notre Dame had 7 Heisman Trophy winners during that stretch of time as well, which is also
they had 3,
true.
7 total.
Correct. No, he's talking about during that stretch in the 40s. They had 3 Heisman Trophy winners in the
7.
40s. Did I say 7? Okay,
yeah.
sorry.
I knew what you were thinking because they have 7 overall. Yeah, right.
Correct.
Yep.
So, it's silly. It really is silly. So, but it's like, like here it's guys, it's not just anti-Notre Dame. Like you're saying, they have an anti-Notre Dame bias. I'm not saying that, but it's also just stupid.
Yeah, right.
Like,
exactly.
Like, do you know who he had as the team of the 20s? Like the current decade we're in right now, that's like 3 years old. You'd think it'd be obvious, right?
Georgia.
Right.
2 titles.
Georgia's 3rd.
What?
Third. We've had 20, 21, and 22. We have 3 seasons in the 2020s. 3 seasons. Georgia's won 2 titles.
Correct.
Yes, Bama and Ohio State. Ohio State fans wouldn't even argue that they've been a better team this decade than Georgia. That's how stupid it all is, Vince. And that's why I say if your formula shows you results of things that you know happened, then it's time to say my formula sucks or it's flawed and I need to fix it. Right. And when your formula tells you that in the 3 years of the 2020s that Georgia is not the best team of the decade, then your formula is broken. And that's the problem.
Correct.
And so, yes, I don't even think Ohio State. Look, we have Ohio State fans in the chat. Do any of you want to claim that the team of the decade of the one we're in, so the last 3 years, is Bama or Ohio State over Georgia? Do any of you want to make that argument that Georgia's anyone but Georgia is the team of this decade?
They've won 2 national
nobody's going to make that argument.
Come on.
No one's going to make that argument. It's silly. But that's what ESPN does. That's what they do. And that's why they're just hard to take it serious at this point in time. Like when you do things like that, it's kind of like Vince, I've had thoughts on things, right? You know, I think this is true. And I've done data research on it. Where I was, you know what? I'm not going to write that article because what I thought is not supported by the data. So I'm not going to write that article.
Right.
You know, and sometimes when you do it and you say, you know what, this kicked out something that's really stupid and I should probably not run with this, or I should I should adjust my my model.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the fact that it's so silly. It really is so silly. And you know, it's absolutely nutty. I'm curious who the team of the 2000s was.
They said Texas.
Texas? Seriously?
Yes. Roger Dodger has given us information as to why USC should be. And I don't disagree with him. Or her. I'm not sure. I assume he.
I'm going to assume since it's Roger.
Well, isn't that like a USC thing? I don't know.
I'm not a USC fan. Well, Pete was their coach the entire time, right? In the 2000s?
Didn't
he take over in 01? I mean, yeah. I mean, so I guess you could say they didn't start the decade off well and didn't end it well, but during the middle, they were pretty flipping good.
They dominated.
Yeah, I mean, 2010 they went 5, or 2000 they went 5-7, then 6-6 the next year. Then they went 11-2, 12-1, 13-0, 12-1, 11-2, 11-2, 9, 12-1, 9-4. They had 7 straight top 5 finishes, 2 national championships, and another year that they honestly should have been national champs, you know, or at least had a crack at it. So, I mean, okay, Texas had what, 1 title? You know, some of the stuff just, Vince, you look at Texas was 1, Oklahoma was 2.
Right.
Really? I mean, we did see Oklahoma win 0 titles in that decade, right? Like Georgia was ahead of USC that decade. Seriously? LSU was ahead of them that decade. Like, really? Like, I know LSU had some really good teams that decade, won a title. Virginia Tech is ahead of them that decade. Like, look, you want to put Florida ahead of them? All right, I wouldn't, but I get it because Florida had 2 titles during that stretch as well, right? But Florida also had some down years during that stretch. So again, sometimes when your formula kicks up, Texas Tech was ahead of Miami. I'm sorry. Miami's 2000 and 2001 teams alone make them better than what Texas Tech was that decade. I mean, come on. What are we doing here?
Yeah, this is a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just, you know, and somebody said LSU won 2 titles. One of LSU's title teams was a 2-loss team. They had no business being a title team that year. I'm sorry, they didn't. So I look at it, Vince, and it's stupid. You're going to have Virginia Tech, Oklahoma, LSU, Georgia, and Ohio State ahead of USC.
Just comedy. Eventually common sense has to take over, and it never does. It never seems to do that.
Well, it is ESPN.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah. So, I mean, who are the teams of the 80s? Nebraska was the team of the 80s. Miami was not. Didn't Miami win 3 titles that decade? Nebraska won. I don't think Nebraska won any titles.
They won theirs in the 90s, didn't they?
Well, the ones under Tom Osborne, yes.
Okay.
Let me look at Nebraska football. I know they won some, I believe, under I think Bob Devaney won some titles, I believe. 70, 71, yeah. So they won 3 in the 90s. And Nebraska is number 2 in the 90s behind Florida State, who won 2 titles.
Oh, they won two?
They won one in 99. They
the
beat
99 one.
Florida
That's right.
in 99. So they won two.
And the 93 one's controversial at best.
Yeah, but Florida State did beat Nebraska that year to win the title. Now, I would argue that the 95 Nebraska team was the singular most dominant team of that decade.
Sure.
I think that's the one that just destroyed Florida in the title game. That was a phenomenal team. So the 90s actually had some great teams. It really did. The 90s had some great teams. Notre Dame Notre Dame finished 10th in the 90s. They finished higher in the 90s than they did the 80s.
Where they have their last national championship.
They had some bad years in the 80s under Jerry Faust, but they also had some bad years at the end of the 90s as well. So it just, the whole thing is just funny. So you just look at it and just laugh. It's just silly. It really is silly. Notre Dame did not finish in the top 10 in the 60s.
They had two titles.
One.
63, 66 for sure.
Right.
I thought they had two.
They had two in the 70s. I don't think they had two in the
73 and 77. That's what I was thinking.
They had two in the 70s. They were
I was thinking 63.
66,
okay.
Right. So, yeah.
Where'd they end up in the 70s?
10th?
In the 70s?
Ninth, yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yep, the Parsegian era apparently did not impress the Bill Connolly formula of the 70s.
Wow.
So, yeah. Let's see here. All right, let's go to era. So in the 70s, Notre Dame went 9-1. In the 70s, Notre Dame ranked 2nd, 13th, 14th, national championship 6th. Then they went 8-3, 9-3, finished unranked 12th, won a title in 77, finished 7th in 78, and then went 7-4 in 79. So, I mean, it's pretty flipping good.
I mean, there's 9. There's 10 available national championships. Right. They have 2. That doesn't make them 9th.
Michigan ranked 3rd with a whopping 0 national.
Zero.
Right. So just the whole thing is just stupid. It really is, man. And Ohio State won a title in the 70s and they finished behind Michigan. It's like just some of this offense. You just really look at it and you can't help but laugh. You know, I mean, you just can't help but laugh.
Man,
and
it's so bad.
Yeah, it just, some of this stuff is just, and again, it's not even just anti Notre Dame. It's just some
stupidity.
Of it's just stupid.
It's just stupidity, period.
You know, and I'm actually looking here. Yeah, you can't even say that Michigan had a better record against Ohio State. Ohio State went 5-4-1 against Michigan in the 70s. Ohio State won one title in the 70s and had three titles in the 1970s that they had unclaimed. You know, or that are unclaimed. You know what I mean? Where like somebody gave them gave them a title, but they don't claim a title that year. So they had 3 of those. They finished in the 70s 5th, unranked, 9th, 2nd, 4th, 6th, 11th. And then in 79, I think that was the year after Woody got fired. The first year of Earl Bruce in 79, they went they ranked number 4, lost in the Rose Bowl to USC. So they went 5-4-1 against Michigan, won a title, had several unclaimed, and went 5-4-1 against Michigan. Yet Michigan in that decade, according to ESPN, was the 3rd best program of the 70s, and Ohio State was 5th. But because the formula said so.
The formula.
The formula. Yeah, it's just the whole thing is silly. The whole thing is silly.
I don't even know what to say.
But that's what ESPN does. But back to Tyrell's question. I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough about if other teams had stretches like that. I mean, I'm like Oklahoma had a 50-something game winning streak in the 50s that Notre Dame snapped. So I gotta think, Vince, at some point in time they had a similar. I'm actually going to look that up real quick. That they had like a similar stretch during that period of time. You know, so yeah, so Oklahoma had a stretch in 54 that ended in 1957 at the hands of Notre Dame. where they went 10-0, 11-0, 10-0, 10-1, lost Notre Dame 10-1. I mean, so other teams have had similar stretches. So I can't tell you that Notre Dame necessarily was the best team ever, but they're certainly in the conversation.
Sure.
And they certainly deserve to be considered the team of the 40s.
Right.
That's for darn sure.
And guess what? You don't need a
yeah.
math formula to figure that out. By the way. Just
and here's the other thing. So of the 40s, he has the 5 best teams of the 40s. Right? Not one of them was one of those teams Tyrell's talking about. Not one of them.
Of course not.
Not one of them are Notre Dame teams, as you mentioned, that were undefeated for 4 straight years, won 3 national titles, and as he said, never trailed. I mean, in 1946, Vince, Notre Dame gave up 24 points.
The whole season.
Yep. The next year, they only gave up double-digit points once. They beat Army by 20. Actually, let me see something real quick. This will actually be somewhat interesting. So, all right, let me check this out. So, you had 45 Army was the best team. 47 Michigan was the 5th best team. You had 1940 Tennessee, 1947 Texas. So, you had 2 teams from 1947 were in his top 5 teams, but not Notre Dame, who won the national championship that year. So, yeah. And by the way, Notre Dame that year beat Army 27-7, by the way. Just want to throw that out there. So, yeah, that's ESPN for you folks. All right. So that's where we're going to end it. We're going to end by talking about the absurdity of ESPN.
Mm-hmm.
Folks, thanks for being with us today. This was a fun show.
Yeah,
Vince, thanks for being on with me today.
Yeah.
Notre Dame, got to pick up today. Taebron Bennie-Powell. We during the show, Bronte Johnson announced that he will be making his decision at 10 a.m. on Saturday. We will not be going live at 10 a.m. We will be going live at 1 to discuss the decision that Bronte Johnson makes and kind of talk about where Notre Dame goes from there. So thanks for being with us today, folks. Do us a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We would love to have you with us. And Vince, get some dinner, get some chow in you, get some rest, and you'll be back tonight, 6 o'clock. You can join Vince for the IB Nation Sports Talk midweek mailbag, right? That's what you guys are doing. And then tomorrow, we're going to have our show at 1, most likely. You're definitely going to be at 6. Are you going to be on with them tomorrow, Vince, or is it just going to be Sean and Coach Shrewsbury?
Well, to start off, it's Sean and Coach Shrewsbury.
Okay.
I think I'm coming on for rapid fire afterwards.
So Sean Stiers will be interviewing. It'd be awesome if they could get him to do rapid fire.
I know, right?
Great. Micah Shrewsbury, the head basketball coach at the University of Notre Dame, is going to be on with Sean Stiers tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk. You're definitely going to check that out. But
baby.
Make sure you're subscribed and you got that notification bell on so you can be let known when we're going to be going live. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and we'll talk to you again very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.